You'll hear that kind of come off and on. We're just wanting to capture this so that if anybody misses it, they've got an opportunity to look back at it. Well, so thank you again for inviting me, Heidi, to come and share this information with you. It is near and dear to my heart, not only because I also have gone through a ton of changes, professional changes over the last few years. I would dare say everybody has, for sure, but also because I actually learned, I started sharing this information with people. I'm in the training and development business. I've been that way. I've been teaching adults for decades. And it was about 3 decades ago that I had an opportunity to learn about the change cycle. And early in my professional career, became certified. And so I've been teaching what I'm going to share with you in some form or fashion over all of that time. And I have to tell you that over maybe, 3 years ago, a little more, we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of when we found out about this thing called a pandemic. It was right around that time when I started hearing about it that I actually contacted the founders of Change Cycle and the authors of the materials that I'm going to share with you, and said, what are we going to do? I mean, we are all, our whole world is about to head into more changes than we've probably ever been in our entire careers, for sure, or maybe our whole lives. And so we have been sharing this, and literally I've been sharing this with people all over the world like crazy since. And so I hope you had an opportunity. And again, I realize you've got a very busy schedule. So thank you if you had a chance to do the pre-work. So raise your hand if you did the e-locator. That was when you picked a change and you wrote down the information personally about that. Okay, good. Well, I'm going to ask you a little bit about that here in just a second, because I want to know where, I don't need to know what change, but I want to know what stage you ended up in. But also, who had a chance to watch the pre-work, what we call e-learning? Did anybody? So you already are acquainted with me. So good. I'm so glad you had a chance to do it. The reason we did it that way is because we want to step right into, now that you have an overview of what the cycle is, I want to step right into how do you lead around it. So I'm just curious. So before we kick that off, when you watched that personally and you were thinking of how this maybe works, hopefully, in your life, does anybody have any comments or thoughts about sort of the overview? I'm just curious as we kick off. And by the way, I try to make our training time together interactive and fun. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, good. Because I can't do it without that. I feel like we all learn better. And just to let you know, logistically, we're going to take a break at the top of every hour so that you have a little time. And I need to ask some help. Kelsey, would you mind being my helper here? Sure. Sometimes I get rolling and the top of the hour comes and I'm not paying attention. Would you stop us and go, hey, cut it out? Okay, excellent. All right. And then I have one other favor. Hey, Dean, would you help with this? When we come back from these meetings, can you help make sure I turn on the record button? Sure. Because I don't want anybody to miss anything. And if you guys could just help me with that's a huge help. Okay, so question, thoughts, comments, when you watch through that overview, anything you notice, something impact you? What do you got?
I think the thing I noticed was everything I was seeing in the different stages. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so true. This just happened.
So you were reading through it and remembering it and experiencing the times you've experienced them.
Reliving some recent experiences for sure.
Okay, so it was explaining some things, yeah? For you. Okay, good. Anybody else?
Comment that as an individual.
Okay, hang on, Dale. I can't hear you very well, but I'm picking up that you said it was a good visual. No, okay, go ahead.
Dale, your audio's wonky.
Oh, he might be frozen there. Okay, go ahead. Try it one more time. Let's see.
Is this better?
Not
No.
really. No.
Change roles.
Oh, okay. That's all right. Okay. Come on back to us. Somebody else.
I noticed that it could be my personality or maybe the way I categorize change, but where I'm just like blindly ignoring some of the stages because I don't want them to feel negative to me. So I just skip forward to the next one. I'm like, it's cool. We'll just push those feelings down because it's my job to move forward.
Tish, you are not alone in that sort of pull, especially if you're more of a optimist, kind of want to move through things, and is that we want to skip past, or we think one side's bad and the other side's good. Please know that that is not true. And that pull to want to rush through them is natural and normal. At the same time, it can cause issues later if we don't actually get ourselves what we need so that we move through those stages. So here's the other part I just have to tell you. All of the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that you heard described, and that we're going to talk specifically about from a leadership standpoint, all of those, and this is part of the reason the change cycle explains things. All of those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors for each stage are normal for that stage, right? And there's just something about knowing that you feel that way, and then you hear it validated that that's okay. When you're in stage 1, that's the way you're going to feel. Or when you're in stage 2, that's what you're going to be thinking. When those kinds of things are explained, it just really helps relieve some of that, Tish, that notion that we've got to speed through it because somehow it's red side bad, green side good. You're not alone. And somebody else, anybody else feedback as far as what you picked up?
For me, I think to use a cliche, it's the epiphany I had was this is more of a journey than a destination. And that journey never really ends because it can be a cycle that continues to repeat even on the things that you've worked through the change for, because that change may not be comfortable for you. So that was good for me, I think.
Okay, you nailed something. And in fact, let me just go ahead quickly and share my screen with you just a moment. You are absolutely right. And it is oftentimes our tendency to want to make change linear. Hang on just a minute. Let me go to pull this up. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, I'm going to come back to this slide, but for just a second, I want to follow up on what you were just mentioning, is this notion that we want to think of it as linear, like it's a straight line, beginning, middle, and end, boom, done, all of that. Oops, but is that ever that way? I mean, really, the reason this was and became a cycle, and if you can even see on the model itself, there are arrows, change coming in at the top. It is moving. It is constantly moving, or at least should be constantly moving as we, get ready for, when we finish one change, we get ready for the next change. And I think that is revolutionary. Sometimes we want to think it's over, done, phew. And you know how I know that's true? How many people said as we were coming even out of the pandemic, I can't wait till things get back to normal. Like, okay, what? There wasn't any going back. It's really going through, right? And we know that about smaller changes as well. So I'm glad you noticed that. Anybody else? Last comments on?
I think it's interesting managing a team, how everybody is in different places and moves at different speeds along this circle. And so trying to manage them, it's kind of you can't do it as a group, you have to do it as individuals almost.
Okay, thank you for that insight, because this is the biggest challenge when you're leading a group through. Everybody's going to do it differently. And the speed with which people go through a change is so personal. And anybody idea, why is it so personal? Why does everybody go through it at a different speed? Anybody want to give me a quick idea that you picked up? What's the speed with which people go through change based on? What do you think?
I think there's a lot of factors of their own comfort level and other changes they've had historically, other changes they may be having in their personal life outside of work.
Yes, it could even be how they were raised. Like if anybody been in, was a part of a military family where you moved around a lot? I mean, you might actually be really great at adapting to new places and new people because you had to, versus someone who might have stayed in their home, you know, their growing up home for years before they moved away the first time. Or it could be, you mentioned, Heidi, how many changes. I also find that it's what kind of change. Like some people are really good with people change. Some people are better with technology change. It just depends. And so thank you for picking up on the fact that this is really personal. And so leaders, that means we have to step back just a minute and know our people well enough. I mean, because sometimes this just has to do with something they experienced in the past. And maybe that was negative, and that immediately makes them worried or fearful. When somebody else might not have been if they've never experienced it before. So thank you for noticing all of those things. And I just want to have us look one other thing, that the reason we're spending this special time with just you guys is because here's what we know. And this is kind of echoing what you said about we've got to do this one by one. Organizational change only happens when the people who make up that organization change. Okay, that's why today we are not going to talk about ADKAR or change management tools. All of those are fabulous when you're trying to set up timing and logistics. This, though, is entirely about why do people think, feel, and behave the way they do when you ask them to change. And let me just stop for a second and say, guys, this isn't just about everybody else. This is about you and I too. And so the reason you went through the overview first, and 2 days ago, I spent 3 hours just talking with team members about this, is because you can't only be as good at changing an organization or your department as you are good at it. So it's kind of like this. It's like when you get on an airplane, you have to put the mask on yourself. I mean, literally, it's you being, even if you're only that far ahead of your team, you and I need to find what it takes or understand these stages even for ourselves so we can keep moving through change. That way we can turn around and help give a hand up to everybody else. Does that make sense? So in the scheme of things, it's you first, and then it's them. And it's only complete when everybody's come across. Now, I will talk about some realism here as we move along about what your likelihood is to complete the change based on what percentage of people actually adapt. We'll get into some of those bits of information as we roll along. But so here's what I want. If you notice, everybody have your materials handy. Everybody got it? Okay. So everybody's got digital materials. Am I right? You pull it up. Okay, excellent. All right, so we're going to be going through, and in fact, just to let you know, so you have an idea, if you haven't looked at the materials, I've got the manual version here, but the first section of those materials, pages 1 through 27, 26, are the overview. So if ever you want to go back and look through it, and you want to get the basics and some of those skills, what we need when we get to each stage, that's the front part of your materials. Okay, we are going to be starting off on page 28. So if you can get yourself to that, what we're going to be doing is deep diving into each of these stages and what you and I can do to help move our teams along. Okay, but in the process of that, I want to just check your memory. Okay?
Jackie,
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I can interrupt. Do you know that there were a lot of pieces to download? Do you know the name of that particular
Should
document?
be first things first.
Should be first things first.
First
Okay.
things first. Do you see that? Okay. Thank you. Does everybody have that up? Thank you for clarifying. I want to make sure we're literally all on the same page. Hey, also, guys, just to give you, please, permission, this training is, as we roll along, it needs to be as relevant as possible for you. If you get rolling and you're like, you have a question or something, you want clarification, would you please raise your hand or stop me or interrupt? Please do that. That's what this is all about. This is for you.
So
We
this
got it?
document should be in an email that I sent to everyone. So it's one of the attachments you got.
All right. And so, and in just a second, you'll see that it looks like this that we're going to be starting with. It has a little red piece of pie up at the top. I like to think of it that way. Okay. All right. So I want to ask you just a few questions as we get through. Everybody's good? Okay. So we took a peek at this, and we already did it in the overview, so you know that we are actually going to, just like in the overview, spend more time on stages 1, 2, and 3 than we do 4, 5, and 6. Because they are more problematic, and they're the ones that we can tend to be needing more assistance. Either we give it or we need it more in those early stages. So when we're using our time as we're rolling along, that's going to be important. So let's I've got a few questions to ask you. And so would you open up chat for just a moment, and I'm gonna open mine as well. First thing I would like to know before we roll into this is when you went over and did the e-locator, a couple things I want you to note is, did you notice that they asked you for your change, right? The initial thing, whatever you put up there. And then they asked you to list out what? Does anybody remember what you had to list out? And there were probably several of them.
Your losses.
Yes, your losses. So what we started realizing is that the change is, the impact of the change that we're going through is seldom the change itself. It's usually what that change asks us to do or be or have to make a shift in, and that can be personal. So the top 3 losses, concerns, those kinds of things, what you listed. And did you notice that you got down to 1? It said, what's the one that has the most impact or you feel the strongest about? You remember that? And you wrote that down there. That's what you were answering the questions about. Isn't it interesting that the change might have been up here, but what actually was bothering you about that change could have been very different? And I just want you to recognize that a lot of times the structural change isn't the thing that ends up getting caught in people's crop or that ends up being problematic. It's what that means to them. And so I'm just curious then, so I don't know what change you wrote or what your losses were, but I'm just curious. Everybody put in there, what stage did you end up in? Okay, good. We got some 4s, 2s, 3s. All right, several 4s, got some 2s. Yeah. Okay, yeah. All right, good. Thank you. Okay, so looks like we've got a really good mix here. And that's great, because I want us to just recognize, here's the deal. You're not just going through one change right now. You probably have 3 or 4 or 5, right? That you might find yourself at different stages in. And so just recognize that as we roll through it, I'd like your permission to be a little generalized in certain descriptions. Is that okay? Okay, because that helps us understand where we are. But I also want to recognize that there may be several elements about even the particular change you chose, and that you could find yourself in different stages. So I want you to just keep that particular change in those stages in mind as we talk about a little bit more with respect to the bottom line here. What we're trying to do is yes, we need to deal with the issues and the tasks and the results, but this is about people. And so here's a couple of questions to ask you in just a second. And first, really recognize coaching and managing, while it is similar in that we want to get to a desired result, this is about moving individuals or a group toward a desired result. And in change, it's really about communication. And we're going to spend an enormous amount of time as we talk about how we communicate when change is happening. And so, Heidi, I'm so glad you brought up the fact that this really should be a vocabulary for us, and that as we start to speak this vocabulary, you'll be able to talk to each other about where you think people are. And I would also suggest that when you notice people in certain stages, use the cycle. Instead of blaming Fred for getting stuck in stage 2, it's just the cycle. Blame it on the cycle. Of course, Fred feels that way. He's in stage 2. And there's just something that increases our ability to have perspective about why people feel the way they do. Because the natural tendency is to kind of get aggravated or judgment on that. The truth is, hey, it's just the cycle. And what they're going through is normal for that stage. Are you with me on that part? Because here's the deal. When you and I get really aggravated, it doesn't help get us what we need to move the group on. And I will tell you one other thing. Let me just give you one tendency and just to show you this. Hold on. Here we go. Here's what tends to happen. And this is my foundation of where we are. Leaders, this is what can happen. We hear about a change far before everybody else, let's just imagine. So we hear about the change, we're talking about it, maybe as a group, we're starting ourselves through stages 1, stage 2, maybe we're discussing it, we're coming up with what we need in each stage, we get to stage 3, maybe we get all the way over to stage 4, and then we announce it to the rest of the group. And where do they naturally go? Where does a group go? Stage 1. Yeah, they have to, naturally, they just heard about it. Boom, they go to stage 1. But we then have forgotten that we had extra time ahead of them and start to get like, hey, come on, what's the matter with you people? How come every time I bring up a good idea, you drag your feet? You see what I'm saying? We often forget that we've had this lead time to move through it. So I'm going to mind blow us here. What if we were able to recognize even ahead of time what people need in each one of these stages? And while we're hearing about it ahead of time, we begin planning how we're going to respond based on what we know they're going to need. So I just want that as a framework. We'll get deeper into that as we go along. But what an amazing outcome that would be, wouldn't it? That if you could, as a leadership team, you could get ahead of it and go, oh, I know where they're immediately going to go to stage 1 and here's what they're going to need. And then to stage 2 and here's what they're going to need. And we are ready for them. All right. So that's the ideal that we're working toward. And so recognizing that this is about building rapport and trust so we can communicate well when we're asking them to change. Okay, here we go. Now, I'll go back to chat for a second. I want to ask you a few questions. And so just put A, B, C, D, E, F, you'll see different choices. To implement a change, you personally, what do you need to know first? A, to understand the big picture. B, do you want specific how-tos? Or C, know the bottom line expectations? So just put in there A, B, or C. What? Okay, all right. Good. Okay, a lot of A's. Yes, got some C's in there too. All right. Okay, so I'm seeing not unusual leaders. We want the big picture. Okay, there's a lot of you who do. Here's another question then. What do you think is most important skill for a change leader? Is it being decisive, being flexible, being a skilled communicator, or thinking outside the box? D, E, F, or G? Okay, good. All right. Okay, first off, they're all important, right? But yes, I'm seeing a whole lot of, it really is being a skilled communicator. All of them are important. Here's another one. As the pace of change continues to escalate here, what do you want to improve on? Do you want to get better at identifying best practices, managing details, or change management and communication skills? Okay, that's kind of a ringer, just so you know. Okay, good. You're with me. Okay, good. Yeah, really, this being a good change leader is got its own set of tools. So thank you, Heidi. You brought that up earlier. We're going to have these tools by the end. As a change leader, what do you do best? Communicate clearly and consistently, follow up on timelines and deadlines, or assess skills needed and tools to implement. All right, good. You're with me. Yeah, I'm serious. Even if you don't like the change, we still, as leaders, need to know how to communicate in times of change. So here's what you're going to notice as everybody's on the same. We got the materials up and running. Yep. Okay. Let me just share with you. There's some consistency here. This book is a guide. I mean, it is a guidebook. I know what happens to training materials, but I want to suggest that you hang on to this. And in fact, you should have already, Heidi, correct me if did everybody get one of these? Did you get something like this? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we've taken everything we're going to be talking about in the next little bit and condensed it into a little cheat sheet. So please, if you don't hang on to the guide, I would suggest you do, but at least hang on to this. And on one side, it's how do you change, and on the other side, it's how do you lead through change. Okay, so please use that as a resource. It's really taking everything and putting it on one page for you. But here's how the book's set up. We're going to talk about, we're going to see that sort of dissecting, and this is one of the pieces of the secret sauce to this. Up to now, we've been talking about you, and you've been looking probably at how are you dealing with change. We're shifting now. The secret sauce is how can you recognize where everybody else is based on what you're now going to know about each stage. Okay, so that first page is all about how do you recognize it? Like, how can you tell where your team is? You're going to hear things and see things, and you're going to pick up those cues. That's page 1. On the other side, if you'll notice, there's a whole checklist of things you and I need to do when we're managing tasks, people, and that's either one-on-one or as a team, and first as us. Okay, the next set of pages, and so these are the same for all 6 stages. They're the same sort of setup, so you can become familiar. This first side is about communication skills, important, essential, and some success strategies for you. And then on the other side is a way to kind of encapsulate everything, a to-do list and a best to avoid. Okay. So as we're going through them, just notice that pattern. Before we dig into this first stage, here's what I want to ask you to do. I want you right now to think of another change. Now, just don't make it the one you did the e-locator for. Okay, I'm sure you have plenty to draw from. I know. So come up with one now, but here's the criteria. Make it something that's still kind of down the road. Like you know it's coming. Maybe it hasn't arrived yet. You haven't started actually having to deal with it. You see it on the horizon. It's coming down the road, and you might have some level of worry or angst about it. Everybody have one of those? Okay, so write it somewhere, so that, because you're going to use that here as we move through each one of these stages. Make, again, not something you've already started, something that's down the road. You know it's coming. You're a little like, oh, and so get that in somewhere written down. All right, everybody ready to go? Okay, just like I mentioned in the video, these first 2 stages are read on purpose. They are meant to stop. We really shouldn't be asking people to do anything here yet, because we're still in these, we're gathering information stages. So I just want to overall what these 2 stages look like. Let's review. If you remember, there is an over and underestimating of perceived control, and that's causing people to bang on that fight or flight button. You know what I'm talking about? It literally is a, and by the way, does anybody recognize that this cycle is similar to Kubler-Ross's cycle of grieving? Did anyone pick up that? That it's kind of, oftentimes it starts with shock, you know, well, that's the red stages, is a bit of like, wait a minute, what's going on? So early on, people aren't sure how to deal with it. And they'll show up a couple ways. And this is the difference between stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 is more like, and they often will withdraw and become really quiet. Like what's going on? Now, if I'm going to use the pandemic as a, because we all experienced that at some level. Do you remember that? Where everybody's kind of like, what? And there was like quiet. And that's typical for stage 1. There's this worry, and then you start to go, well, what does that mean for me? And so that's happening. Now here's the deal. When you and I experience something, a change, let's say it's something, the experience is something new. We've never experienced it before. Let's call change that for our exercise. And what happens is we don't know how to, if this is like new, nobody ever been through a pandemic. We're like, what? And so what we tend to do is we go back into our memories, and we have our little file clerk that keeps our memories send us something that would help us cope, right? But if we've never experienced it, there's nothing there. So it's sending us other stuff, right? Which is why we tend to overgeneralize. Or our imagination starts going, we're like, oh, well, if that can happen, if they could do that there, what could they do next? So we tend to overgeneralize. It's for protection, but can you see how it can get us skewed in how we feel right out of the gate, right? People worry about a lot of things. Overgeneralization, it's based on memories. And sometimes, if you were at a company and they made a similar last company I was with, when we started to do that, it all went sideways. It may not have anything to do with their current situation, but this is the closest they've got at a memory that's similar. Do you see how that's working? And so that causes us to pull on memories that really aren't helpful and actually can make things worse. And no wonder then people become defensive. That is a natural tendency. What we're looking for when we get in these early stages is something really important, which I want to ask you the question on. All of these are the reason the truth and reality and all that kind of stuff gets really murky in here, and people are struggling to know what's real and what they have to accept. Okay, so that's just an overview of those two red stages. Any comments or thoughts about that? Have you seen these red stages? I mean, we felt them, I'm sure, ourselves. Okay, so let's dive in for just a minute. And I'm going to quiz you here to see how much you remember when you watched the video. So here's an overview. You've got it on your page 28 there, giving you some details. You saw it in the overview, so I'm just going to hit a couple highlights. Remember, this is the first announcement. The primary experience is lost. No two things can occupy the same space. Something new comes in, something old has to go out. That's why people are like, wait, what? What did they just announce? What do they say? I mean, that they start beginning to go, okay, what's going on? The problem is they stayed there too long. They start to get worried about everything, and that's where the paranoia, like, what? Why are they having closed door meetings? They don't usually have closed door meetings. How come I didn't get invited to the closed door meeting? What's going on? Not unusual. Stage one. Okay. And part of this is they're fearful, cautious, and paralyzed. This is totally new. Now, here's where I'm quizzing you. What do people need when they are in stage one in order to move out of stage one? What do they need? Someone remember? Okay, good. I saw it on chat. Someone shouted out. What do you need? Yes. All right, I'm seeing it there. It's safety. When people are suddenly, announced with some kind of a change, or we're gonna even if it's a new program. Let's say I was a SME of this old computer program, this app or whatever we had, and everybody turned to me, and I was the one. And suddenly you go, okay, oh, great news! We're getting some new technology. We're going to replace that program. We're going to put in a brand new one. Now, that throws me right into stage one. What am I afraid of? Come on, it's a new technology, should make things easier. But what am I afraid of?
Maybe like your job security, if you have to learn something new and you're not the expert anymore.
Okay, now, for those of you who love to come up with new technologies and introduce them to people, you're going to think that reaction's crazy, aren't you? You're going to think, why would you worry about your job? But can you see that I might go, what if I can't learn it? What if I don't know it? What if everybody used to turn to me and now they don't turn to me at all? I mean, what if I become irrelevant? And then I lose my job. Do you see how fast people can go there? Everybody with me? So it's, and not, I mean, we all do it. And so it's important that we recognize what people need here is safety. Now, if it's me and a computer program and that's all I'm afraid of, what would safety look like? Someone shout out, what would safety look like? Eric, what do you think? What would safety be for me?
Something that's easy that I can grasp real quickly.
Yeah. Okay. So assure me that I could grasp this, right? Michelle, anything else you'd add to that? What would safety look like to me?
I think also addressing the loss, like maybe loss of, what they knew prior. Is this transferable? Is there, kind of excitement and hope? Maybe that's jumping ahead a few stages.
No,
but,
no.
that confidence that you aren't completely losing prior knowledge, but that you can learn quickly and it is going to transfer some of your skill set.
Yeah. Honestly, it could be reassurance. You'll get it. Look, you can pick this up. Or how about we'll give you training. You'll have plenty of time to learn it before you get asked to do it. And we're going to let you get ahead of everybody else because we know everybody's used to turning to you. And so you'll be up. Do you see what I'm saying? Those kinds of things are what we're looking for. If the dominant emotion is fear, we have to deal with the fear. All right. And this isn't easy, leaders, especially if you're over in stage 4 already. And you're like, what's the problem? So we have to step back and go stage 1. This is what's driving the situation. So here's what I want us to do. Look down on the middle you're on your screen there. Look at the place on the page 28. We're only going to spend digging this deep on a couple of these stages, but I want us to recognize especially what stage 1 would look like. Naomi, would you do me a favor? Do you see those bullets where it says to know more, notice more, and then there's several red bullets? Would you mind reading that? And here's what you're reading. You're reading the telltale signs of stage 1, so you can recognize it. Go ahead.
Yep. Withdraws, avoids talking about thoughts and feelings. Concentrations on old routines, dodging the change. Speculates via his or her experiences in the past, bad. Perceives a large or total loss of controls over the situation, fights the change, freezes, and or puts up defenses, generalizes that because the change seemed bad, then everything is bad.
Okay. Anybody? Anyone? Have you seen this? Have you felt it yourself? Okay. So everybody, every change we all go through. Some of you whip right through stage 1, but some people get stuck here because they start to worry and they start to, wonder what's going on. Kelsey, would you hear this? This is what you're going to be noticing people are saying.
Sorry, I was just gonna also make a little point. My team, we actually talk about it as the what if monster. So that was my 8-year-old daughter actually taught that to me, and she was having trouble getting on the bus, and it was just like, what if, and it was all these like scary what ifs of like, what if I can't get dropped off in the right place? What if I can't find a seat on the bus? And so part of it is just accepting that you have these what ifs, and then trying to figure out like, how do you kind of like reframe it, like what if? And so the what if monsters, like how do you kind of like poke holes in that? So that's what our team tries to talk about it. When moments we have change, we're like, okay, what's your what if monster? Because like you have it. So
can I steal that? I love that. We actually are going to talk about how prevalent it is and necessary to ask, what if this happens?
Yes.
Right. I think that's good. So to read the little triangles there. What are you going to be hearing people say in this stage?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
So hear this.
Hear this. I wonder, I think I'm lost on the pages. What?
Okay. So we're on page 28, it should say, and it's the first page of this red stage. Under hear this, and it starts with why and why me.
Okay. So why me? I'm afraid of what this might mean. This concerns me. It seems really bad. I don't know what to believe. I'm shocked. I'm staying out of sight.
Okay, so that's what you're going to hear people saying there, and it's not as easy to find this because sometimes people we noticed this during the pandemic, right? People sort of disappeared. And now the isolation didn't help necessarily. It got confusing, but people tend to they make changes like this all the time, but they don't follow through on them. So you know what? I'm just going to kind of ignore what they just suggested. All of that is normal for this stage, but here's the deal. At the very bottom of the page, it says that the truth is we have to manage the fear. We can't deny it. We can't ask them to cut that out. It really is, we have to try to turn that fear into something more productive for them. Because here's what you'll start to hear whenever you start to hear phrases like always, everything, always. That's stage 1. That just means they're caught in this, and what they need is a sense of safety. They don't have it yet. They're telling you that. Okay, so let's turn then. So that really is what's driving people's thoughts, feelings, and behavior here in stage 1 is they feel out of control. Right? They don't know what's going on. They get confused about what real fears are and what imagined fears are. And so they become very cautious. Now, here's the deal. In real life, this behavior is protecting us. Okay, so it's not that the behavior is bad. It's just that when it's in the workplace and it causes us to, deny something's going on, that's unproductive. And so we have to move them past that. And so all of these we probably seen or heard, have we not? People saying. And so what we need to do is to notice more. All right, so let's take a peek real quick at the how to manage. Now there's 2 buckets that we're managing, tasks and results, because you still have to get the job done. I mean, regardless of what the change is about, we still have to get work done, do we not? And have there been times when a particular change is disrupting how we do other things because of how people are feeling? Yeah, so it's just real important. Here's the way that we want to manage and lead during stage 1. Kurt, would you mind reading managing tasks and results and reading the red bullets under managing people?
Yep. So high direction, articulate what will remain the same, set clear boundaries, clear expectations, and managing people. High encouragement, reassure as much as possible, create areas of safety, listen, don't worry to fix it. Okay, so hold on. Who are my problem solvers? Problem solvers, raise your hand, problem solvers. Oh, it's probably everybody on here. Okay, here's the hardest part. Don't try to fix it here. First off, you can't. You're trying to get them moving towards something, and you're going to be tempted to want to get in once they start going, oh, what? I don't know what's going on. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's going to be tempting. Not here. This is not where I'll give you exactly what you want to do. So let's talk for a second, looking down on the same page, managing self. First, I mean, really, you can't help anybody else until you're helping yourself. So be sure you have the answers to provide safety to you as you then start to talk to everybody else. So you need to figure out what's staying the same and defining what this change really means, etc. But I want us now to look at, and this is true for every stage, this is really cool. What should we do one-on-one with our team members right at the beginning? And what should we do as a group? So Betsy, would you do me a favor and read both the one-on-one bullets and team real quick? You see that under managing others?
For one-on-one, ask what are your specific concerns, reflect back what you hear, listen with empathy, agree to a follow-up conversation, and agree on immediate priorities.
Okay, now hold on just a second. Here's the deal. You're going to be asking the questions, and you can see the questions at the bottom there in the little blue box. What are your concerns? What are you worried about? Now, we don't need answers for those. We're just asking them to say it. And how do people feel when you just ask them, how are you, or what are you worried about? Jolie, what does that do for somebody when someone takes the time to ask those things?
Makes them, recognize themselves how they're feeling. And I would say being asked the question also can make them feel heard, or that you're, caring about where they're at, and those feelings that they have are being validating.
Right.
It's okay.
You don't even have to agree with whatever they're afraid of. It's just listening. We're not trying to fix here. We just want to ask the questions. What's going on? Now, there may be some legitimate concerns you hadn't thought of. So you're gathering information here one-on-one. Okay, Betsy, go back to the team. So that's what we do one-on-one. We should have a meeting with everybody one-on-one. Now, as a group, what do we do?
Have regularly scheduled team meetings, clarify what you know, ask what are your specific concerns, issues, or fears, ask what would make things safer during this change.
Okay, so now we're even asking them, what kind of safety do you need? I mean, now here's what's real important, guys. During these early stages, there's going to be a lot of chatter, or people are talking a lot about it, or they're not, and you're not hearing anything because they're kind of disappearing. So when you get the whole group together, it's important that if you open the question up, what's going on? What are you worried about? What's concerning? That you deliver that with open tone. Do you know what I'm talking about? That you're asking, you're just gathering, you might want to be writing things down. Again, don't worry about fixing anything. You just like to give them an opportunity to be heard, like you mentioned. So here's the questions that are leading to what we were talking about just a minute ago. Kelsey, I love this. What's the worst that could happen? So this might be a question to ask yourself, but also maybe others is, okay, how many of you do ask this question yourself frequently when something happens? How many of you, this is a go-to question. Yeah. Okay, could we live with that? And then, but here's the kicker. This is the next one that I really like. And Kelsey, you might want to throw this in there with your little one. But what's most likely to happen? So that's that moment where you have to go, well, okay, what's most likely to happen is, and help them kind of come into perspective. But then what are your concerns? And what if you actually pulled out a pad of paper and started writing it down? I mean, seriously, what would that say to your team if you ask them that question, you start writing it down? Joe, what would that say to your team?
It would just help bring focus to the problem and ultimately what they're concerned about.
Yeah, and it's telling them, listen, this matters to me. I may not be able to do anything about any of them, but I want to know what they are. I want to know where you are. So capturing those is super important. Now, again, I'm spending more time on especially this one and especially this next page. If you'll turn with me to page 30, because this really matters too. Now, in some changes that you guys have already implemented, don't worry if it didn't kind of come out this way, but use it as an example going forward. But I will tell you, we've been saying communication is critical. And the truth is, what you do in that communication announcement of here's the change, and we're telling everybody for the first time, can really set the tone for how it goes. So I want to read through this and then we'll take our break. Bob, would you mind reading with me for just a second? So this is where it says a well done change announcement does the following. And so would you mind, as we're reading through it, if you've seen this before, put a little check. Each one of those is a check mark, okay? So Bob, would you read through those bullets?
You want the big bullets and the little bullets?
Yeah, give them both. I may stop you once in a moment, okay, but go ahead and start through.
That is fine. Explain specific issues that have made the change necessary. So highlights how the change addresses these issues.
Okay, now let me stop for just a second. How many of you earlier, when I asked you, how do you like to receive information? You said you wanted the big picture, which is really the why. How many of you are wired up to need why? Like you almost can't hear anything else unless you were clear on the why. Everybody like that? Okay, this is why. In a change announcement, explaining the specific issues that have made this necessary is the why. And then coming back and saying, okay, so we know that's true, and here's how it is we're going to address those reasons or the fixes. Okay, you with me, everybody? Okay, Bob, go ahead.
The second one is acknowledges the changes upside and downside. So answers why, what, when, what if, and how questions, and acknowledges past difficulties and disappointments.
Okay, so somebody tell me why you would talk about the downside. I mean, aren't you supposed to get everybody revved up about this, the reason we're doing this? Why, Wendy, why the downside? What do you think, Wendy?
I think it is about having credibility with the team. Like if you're only selling the upside, then you're not being real with them.
Have you ever heard that before? Like a change is announced and it's all like, woo, rah, rah, and nobody ever dresses like this is going to be hard or we're going to have to let go of. And what do you start to think? Just what Wendy was saying. Sometimes you start to go, I think they drank the Kool-Aid, and somehow it brings up almost like suspicion because it doesn't feel like they're looking at all the ramifications. So yes, that's why we don't want to be overly cheerleader about it, because the truth is it probably is a downside, or something we're going to have to get better at. Okay, Bob, keep going. Sorry.
Sure thing. Gives as much overall big picture information as possible. So addresses short, medium, and long-term ramifications.
Okay, keep going.
Offers milestones when possible instead of hard deadlines. Avoids cheerleading and overselling the benefits.
There it is. That's it. Okay, keep going.
Shows an interest in people's questions, concerns, and comments. And has a specific follow-up plan for the announcement.
Okay, so that's what put a check mark by any of those you've seen in change announcements. And if we're missing any check marks, that's where we can start with future change announcements. Anything stand out to you there? Interesting. So when we're communicating, especially right out of the gate, how we do that and express what's going to happen and share with people really matters. And so at the bottom, you can see success stories. Here's what you're doing. You're going around within seriously, and you can, if you can even move with me over to the next page where the to-do list is within 48 hours, you need to have some kind of a meeting with your team. As soon as something gets announced and people are like, what? Then we want to get up in front of people. So some sort of check-in, some kind of a meeting. It could be an all-hands meeting, or it could be just we're going around one-on-one. And the point is to acknowledge them wherever they are. So if you'll look at this, there it is, to communicate the change facts. But the next one is communicate on the page, says communicate what will remain the same. Way more is going to stay the same than's going to change. But remember our tendency to go, no. But look at the second bullet there. Scott, what does that say? Just the one that says expect. Yeah, why?
Sorry. Expect silence and blank stares.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
Because people are still processing.
Yeah, especially thinkers. You got thinkers in your group. You've got people who are like, you don't spring. I mean, listen, in certain communication styles, they don't like change already. Don't spring things on people and expect to hear something positive. You may not even hear their questions or worries right away because they don't even know quite what does that even mean. So, but don't be thrown by that. You might get some of that. That's okay. Now you're just going to keep asking questions and just keep noticing that some people will withdraw, and some people will come right towards you and go, oh, what's going on? But your goal is to be as visible as possible. Now, if you look on the top of page 31, here's just one more thing, and then we'll take a break and come back and fix something. Okay, best to avoid trying to fix what people are feeling. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this happen where you've been feeling really strongly and you tell somebody about it and they like immediately jump in and try to fix it. Anybody? And how do you deal with that? Is that a thumbs up? No, not usually. Yeah. Usually it's like, I just need to. And so you may even want to ask them, would you like to just vent for a minute? Find out from your team. So just recognize that people are going to want to say things that they may not, once they've processed, really feel anymore. So be okay with that. Don't send the message that the old way's better, because you'll throw people off. And I will tell you something, leaders, as soon as you stepped out front as a leader, you had great influence, probably more than you realize. If you do not like this change and you let people on your team know it, later, when you change your mind, this is kind of like what we were always told, don't ever let your parents know you're upset with your boyfriend or girlfriend, because later when you get over it, they won't. You know what I'm talking about? It's the same way with your team members. They're not going to switch back once they have more information as fast as you. So just, if you feel strongly, you need to watch what you let them see. And we call it whine up line or sideline. Don't whine about change downline. You will regret that because you'll have to undo it. So watch out for that. Don't overhype the change. It is what it is to them, right? They'll come along, but you've got to give them time. And just recognize the stage is not going to last forever. It might feel it in the beginning, but it is not going to last forever. And so just be okay with them being in that moment where they're feeling that way. Any thoughts or questions about stage one? Okay, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, here's what we're going to do. So whenever you sit back down, what I'd like you to do is at the bottom of page 31 or on a blank sheet of paper, if you wouldn't mind, I want you to take the change that you mentioned earlier. Just a minute ago, I asked you to think of a new change that's down the pike. And I want you to answer these questions about that change, just for you personally. Okay, any questions about what we're gonna do right now? So how about, if you don't mind, can we take a 5-minute break? Just make this a short one right now. We'll maybe a little longer in the second time. Okay. All right, guys, I'm gonna read what's going on in chat and I'll be right here if you have any questions, but come on back in 5. Hang on a second, I'm gonna turn the break. So if everybody loves Fred and you know he generally doesn't like change and he's likely to be one who will push back more, or he's already started that, pull Fred in. You know, pull Fred in. You might even in the future pull Fred in early. What are you looking for from Fred? Anybody?
Leadership.
Yeah, leadership. Okay. And so by bringing him in, what are we trying to accomplish there? Dean, what do you think?
I would say like get an inside person.
Yeah, I'm serious. You're trying to get early buy-in because you know if he's like in the know and he's kind of in the inner circle on this thing, and you could say, Fred, look, everybody turns to you. I know that's true. And so I want you to hear about what's coming down the pike a little early because I know that people turn to you. And so I want you to have some answers that maybe they don't even have questions for yet, but I want you to have them so when they do and they turn to you, you'll know. Now, first off, what does that do between you and Fred?
Makes you stronger.
Yeah.
Makes him your partner, your advocate.
Right. And I think we forget that sometimes Because what's the risk if you alienate Fred?
He's going to make everyone else his partner, not
Right.
yours.
So that's where we sometimes don't hit the mark. And so we got to go back. And it's okay, again, to be transparent and say, you know, and if, hey, here's another thing, blame it on this training. I mean, just say, hey, listen, I learned something new. I realized that this wasn't handled like we want to do in the future. And so let me just tell you that. And then here's what we're learning and what we want to do differently. And we could use your help. I mean, seriously, what's the worst that could happen? Right? So did that answer your question, Dean?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to keep answering your question as we move into this next stage. So let's just go ahead and hop into that because we're still in the red stages. We know that's true. So we're turning now to page 32. Here's what we recognize, Bo, in closing up stage 1. You need to be smart and you need to be sensitive to people right here. Okay. And people are feeling out of control, and that's just an awful feeling. And so, but we have to make sure these are adults. Hopefully they are professionals. And so we and they need to be in control of themselves. And we're trying to set the tone for that. So these check-ins help make people feel like someone's listening. And it really creates kind of a place for people to know, I can tell you how I'm feeling and you won't freak out. Or I can tell how you're feeling and maybe you can just listen to me. Okay, let's move to stage 2. You ready? All right. So to me, the difference between stage 1, which is more like in stage 2, is this. Stage 2 is where people start to move into this thing and they start to go, wait a minute. Well, hold on a minute. Who came up with this harebrained idea to do this thing? Yeah, I mean, it's really the loud stage. It's where people start to go, oh, whoa. And because the difference is the dominant emotion was fear, now it's anger. Right? And now they're starting to go, hang on a minute. Now I'm starting to feel the pinch for what this thing means. And that doesn't seem right. So that's where you start to get the biggest pushback. Feelings are of resentment because they didn't know why we had to do this. Thoughts are skeptical, like, who came up with this? And then that's where you can almost see heels dig in. Is everybody familiar with this stage? Yeah? You see, okay. So here's the deal. What are people missing in this stage? What is the thing in the first stage they needed? Safety and security. What are they telling you loud and clear they need more of? What is it? What's that?
Information.
Information, and lots of it. Now, here's the deal. Sometimes people start to push back so hard, companies get like frustrated with that. And then they put information on a need to know basis. You know, like, well, fine, you don't want to hear that, then, well, what happens then? You know, so it's so important. And this takes patience and restraint, sometimes leaders on your part. Is you really want them, I get it, they're aggravated and angry. It's because they don't have enough information. And so they're letting you know, I need to know more. I need to know more. They're upset because they don't know. They're basing that on opinions or things that have happened in the past. And don't you love that quote at the bottom? Yes, thank you, Heidi. Because that's the part. We think we've announced enough. Like I told everybody, I sent the email, good grief, that should be enough. That doesn't mean that it really is getting through. And here's the other thing. People only listen when it starts to apply to them. Right? So you may be telling them in one fashion or form, but it's not getting through until it becomes important to them. So here's the deal. In stage 2, these strong feelings are often based on past negative experiences. Last company, they did that. They started to make these kind of changes. Next thing I knew, our whole department decided. In fact, this organization that I spoke to on Thursday, they outsourced something that they had in-house for decades. They decided to outsource that entire function. And they've literally been 6 months in the middle of this change, and some people still in stages 1 and 2. And what they started to recognize as they were asking, what's bothering you, is there was a whole department that said, if you can do that to that department, then you could do it to mine. the whole department was stuck in stage 1 because they were afraid. And so it was like eye-opening to recognize negative experiences perhaps or fears from the past. Maybe that's what they're working on. This is new. They're pulling it up from things they've heard about or are worried about because they feel out of control. So they're telling us they need information. So let's just take a quick peek again at the to know more, notice more. Althea, would you mind reading on page 32 where it says to know more, notice more? What are the behaviors and attitude that indicate struggling in stage 2?
I'm sure. So shows passive or aggressive anger at decision makers, blames others for what is happening, asks lots of questions, often the same ones over and over, claims not to understand a clear and repeated concept, work is slow, done poorly, and or behind scheduled, expresses a lack of trust, even disgust in facial expressions and body language.
Anyone? I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, it real, and that, I love the one that says, ask a lot of questions, same ones over and over again. Why do you think they're doing that?
They don't feel heard.
It's partly because they don't feel heard. And the other part is because they're hoping you will give a different answer.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're trying to
somehow,
get
That's
the
it.
answer they want.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, and I get it. They're upset, they're worried, they're fearful still. They don't know what this means to them. And so you're going to start to see those kinds of behaviors. If any of you've seen that, that's normal for stage 2. That's where you and I need to go, oh, and then say, what do they need? They're telling me they need information. They don't know enough yet. No wonder they're worried and starting to resist. Now, one other thing just to recognize is this is also where water cooler chatter starts to happen. Try to minimize that, and you do that by doing lots of communication within. That's why I'm saying more is more. And you may go, I have said this 4 times already. That's okay. They need to hear it again and say it again, because you keep talking to them, they're not talking as much to each other, right? You want to be a part of those conversations. So keep the communication open. If you look down here under hear this, these are the kinds of things that they're saying. William, would you mind reading what it says, stage 2 language to listen for? William, do you see those?
Yes. Yeah, I see it. So stage 2 language to listen for, there's something they're not telling us. This just does not add up. None of this seems fair. This makes me so angry. I don't think they understand how things really work. And why will this work any better than other things we've tried?
Okay. Anybody ever heard any of those? Stage 2. Okay. Of course, they're just missing information. Now, I want to tell you that sometimes you can even give them information and they may still not like it. The change. Okay. You can get all the way over to stage 5 and still not like a change. That isn't what we're going for. We're going for understanding. Okay. So just recognize that skepticism at this stage is normal. These are thinkers. They need time to process things. And if it doesn't make sense yet to them, they're letting you know, I need to hear more. And so that's why we need to be present and accounted for to be able to share more. So let's see, Kelsey, would you help me with this? How to manage and lead more resourcefully. Read the managing tasks and results and managing people. You can see it on the screen too.
Yep. So managing tasks and results, high direction, provide clear structure, give specific and timely information, and set clear goals. And then for managing people, high encouragement, stay in tune with people's needs and attitudes, use conflict resolution strategies and skills, and determine what information people are still missing.
Yeah. And so you're going to keep asking questions. What more can I tell you at this point? And you may not even have the answers. So leaders, you may have to go find out the answers. But what if they ask you a question, you just say, I don't know the answer to that, but I will go find out. Again, you just saying that, what does that say to them about you? You know, it says, I care, I want to know too. And so what you're trying to do is be present, even if you don't have all the answers during this stage. So if you're looking down on where it says managing self, and managing others one-on-one and team. Lawrence, would you look at the managing others list on one-on-one? What should we be doing one-on-one if people are in stage 2?
Yeah, so first you should ask them, the current situation reminds them of a past experience. Ask for details and comparisons. Ask, what specifically do you want from me? And agree to and schedule a follow-up conversation.
Now, hold on before you go to the team part. Let me just say that third bullet, watch the tone. Because that could be delivered with a little bit of a snippy tone. Don't do that. We want to really be open and authentic. I want to know what more I can do, how I can help more. Does that make sense? Okay, so good. We're having those one-on-one conversations. Now, what does it say, Lawrence, for what we should do with our team?
For a team, you should have regularly scheduled meetings and have scheduled team meetings often. Acknowledge change curiosity. Ask, what specific information are you or us missing? Take notes on what they say and address distraction of change and its impact on day-to-day functions.
Okay, so remember, this can start to get people consumed a little bit and too much talk, and they're not getting the other work done. So do address that. And I will say, here's the deal. You're going to have one-on-one conversations, but if you want to ensure everyone's getting all the same information at the same time, then have a group meeting. Okay, and so the more you can say, let's say I wanted to share this with everybody all at the same time. So I'm not saying a little this and a little that, and I forget who I've said what to. That's what the value is. I get it. It's really, your time is precious, and meetings, everyone hates them. However, if you're going to deliver really valuable information, that would be the best place to know everyone hears the same thing. You with me on that? So that's what we're wanting to do. And so the kinds of questions then we're also asking is, what specific facts do we know now? When can I get more? And what's the real truth? You know, what's the reality? Because right here, everything seems a little, it's fueled by all kinds of past situations that may not have any relevance right now, but they're still causing angst and strong feelings. So if you'll ask this question, this is one of those, the kind of like when somebody's emotional about this, you can kind of flip it around and say, well, okay, in light of what we know, what would you tell me to do? Or what would I tell someone in my shoes, to do? So it kind of helps people like flip it around and say, well, how would you have me handle this? I don't have all the information yet. What would you suggest? And sometimes that can be beneficial. I love the quote, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. Isn't that true? And I want to come back to that here in just a minute when we talk about this. Okay, so under the next page where we talk about strategic communication tools. Earlier when I asked you the way you like to receive information, and some of you pick, I want the big picture, some want the details, some want the bottom line. The truth is that everybody on your team needs it a little bit different, and they usually are in these buckets. They want to know what, why, how, where, or what if, those kinds of questions. And earlier I asked you, for those of you who are why, for example, it's hard to even hear the other stuff until the way you want information comes to you. Do you experience that? Like if I don't hear really what I need to know, like what's worrying me the most, I can't even pay attention to the rest of it. And the people in your team are the same way. And so what we have to recognize is we all communicate the way who does. We assume everyone communicates the way. Yes. And so if we're a what person and we're busy out there going, what's going on and what's happening and what to expect, blah, blah, blah. And the whys are sitting back there going, you haven't answered a single thing for me. Because we haven't hit the why, you can see how we're like, Rrr. So if you're thinking, well, I don't know what everybody is, here's a challenge for you. Pay attention to the way they ask questions. They will tell you exactly what they need to know. They'll start their questions with what's going on, what happened, or they'll say, why did they come up with this? Why are they doing it this way? Or how are we supposed to, how are we going to fix it? They'll tell you, pay attention to the first word they use when they're asking you questions. But if you're like, oh, even that's too hard, just do them all. Do them all. Cover the why, the what, the how, the what if, cover them all, especially at a team meeting. And that way you at least know you're beginning to speak their language. Any thoughts or comments on that? Does that all make sense? And it's just a simple thing. I mean, you could get as complex as DISC or some of those other things, but if you want to keep it real simple, pay attention to the questions they ask. That's the easiest way to do it. And so if you look here over on strategic communication tools on page 34, you can see that there's a lot of bullets here we've already started to talk about. Informal invitations to talk are good. Come in my office for a second, or let's just sit right down here and talk. Be visible and consistently asking, what can I find out for you? I don't know that answer yet, but I'm still working on it, and touching base with people. And so create those formal and informal check-ins. You know what? I'll answer that question because in an hour we're going to have a team meeting and I'm going to tell everybody the answer to that question you just asked me. So if you don't mind, hang on to that. Just know I'm going to get to it in next hour when we meet. Those kinds of conversations begin to take the out of people's concern and worry. Now, if it does get out of hand and somebody gets like too excited or too upset, then you may need to call HR and talk about how conflict resolution can go, and maybe we can have some assistance with that. So I mean, we need to be real. There are some times when it isn't as easy as I'm making it all sound, but just recognizing, look down on success strategies. Be sure, especially the third bullet there, create formal and informal communication systems. Here's the deal. More is more. Send it out in an email, talk about it at a meeting, do one-on-ones. I mean, you just find every avenue by which you already communicate and use it. And if you'll look at the next page under do it, here's some real important things. Expect people are going to be skeptical. It's just their way of telling you, I don't know enough. You got to tell me more, right? And productivity, listen to this one. Productivity is likely to improve for a little bit because people are trying to like prove the old ways better. Like they'll get really fast at it. They'll really make it look good. And that's natural because they're trying to say, let's hold on to this old way. It's just a sense of control they're trying to get. I get it. I totally get it. I have done it myself. Clarify expectations. Keep going. Clarifying what is really this. Only this much is changing. These things, they're all staying the same. Only that much is changing. These things are staying. So sometimes we have to keep going with that. And consistently ask, what specific information can I gather for you? So lots of information going out, and watch out. Now look under best to avoid. Watch out that you don't let it get to you and you start to become defensive. Especially if you're already over in stage 4 or 5, this is a tough one. And we're just all human beings, but just watch if you start to feel yourself wanting to go. Step away. We'll come back and talk about that later, and go talk to another leader. The last thing you want to do is start in the defensiveness, because if you do, Eric, what starts to happen there? Does that help at all?
No, you start to build untrust.
Right. And then again, back to the overselling, and then people get confused. Just stay as neutral as you possibly can. They will come through this. They will move past it. And here's something else too. Again, don't argue about what's been communicated or not, or recognize there's conflict and that people feel strongly, because just remember, you may think you've told them enough, but they don't care until they care about it. Right. And again, if you've got deep thinkers, which I know you do, it takes some time to process, and they're gonna roll on it, and then they're going to go, wait a minute, and they'll have a question. Don't be upset or thrown off by that. Sometimes that's, they reach that moment where they're ready to hear it, and that's okay. So now what I want you to do is look back at the bottom of that page 35. Go back to your change that we were thinking about earlier and answer these 4 questions at the bottom of that page. All right. Anybody still need more time? Okay. All right. So here's what I'd like us to do next. Hang on a minute. I want us to just for a moment think about hang on, how we might apply some of what we've been talking about just in these first two stages. So we'll be looking at anything so far you've picked up that you feel like already we could, okay, I could put that into use right away. Anybody have anything that's already kind of bubbled at the top? You're like, oh, I can so do that and get better at this change thing myself.
Jackie, the big thing that's rising to the top for me is really pre-planning for it and who might need what, which I think the tendency is just to start with the information and then see how it goes. So that's something I'm recognizing I can do a lot better.
I was thinking the same thing as we just went through this exercise, and where it says like we're individuals who can assist and individuals who may need assistance. I was thinking we definitely have an opportunity to plan in advance of change communication. So
make a huge difference, can it? Yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
I think for me, it's just recognizing that like everyone on my team might react differently to the change and need like different tools and different than how like I'm reacting to it and what I need, which is helpful.
Nice. Yeah, that's really good. Anyone else?
I think along the lines of planning, it's also like capacity planning, recognizing that you're going to have some unproductivity or that there will be some slack in the system at stage 2, and just to kind of like plan for that as a manager, just like you would a project. And so you're not burning out your people at the same time as they're going through it.
Very good. Very good. Anyone else?
Question on that,
Oh.
Tell me that first.
Oh,
Yes.
Can't hear you very well. Put the mic kind of up, maybe see if pushing it away from your face. Yeah, now try. Well, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, feel free to type something if you can. Well, here's what I want us to do next. We're going to go into a breakout room here real quick. What I want us to do when we get into this breakout room, and this will allow us some time to discuss some of what you may have been thinking about there. I want you to recall a time, and I want to specifically focus on this particular thing. I want you to recall a time when you experienced a change announcement. And I want you to describe that process, the content, the expectations. Okay, so you're just going to come up with what that is, but then here's what, and so feel free if you want to pull out a phone and take a picture of this or do a screenshot of this. This is what I'd love for you guys to come back with. Like, how did it go? It could be at your current organization or another one. It doesn't matter. We're just looking for an example of how did it go? You don't need to tell me the specific thing, but just come up with some examples. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how did it go? And what would you now, knowing what you know, what would you likely do perhaps different? Especially just with the change announcement, because I think that's a really incredible opportunity we have that we can capitalize on. Any questions about what you guys are going to discuss? Okay, so I'm going to give you, 8 minutes, something 8 to 10 minutes max, and then we'll come back. You all know how to join a Zoom room and all that, right? Everybody good with that? Okay, so just remember when I give you the 1 minute, you don't have to click or anything. It'll take you back when the 60 seconds are up, and then we'll just talk about that for just a minute. Some of you will be in a room with 3, some with 2, and let me make sure we've got everybody covered. Okay, any questions? Clear as mud on all that? Okay, see you back in a bit. Here we go. Go ahead and join. Turn back on our recording. Okay. Give them another 10 seconds and everyone else will be back. Okie dokie. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. All right. So I if anyone would be willing or interested in sharing, what did you just maybe, especially the areas of what could we do that, didn't happen perhaps that could increase effectiveness of the change announcement? Where'd you go there? Anybody want to share?
I think for our team, it was Bob and myself, we shared that we could have listened more to the change and stuff, listen to what the employees were telling us versus just trying to force the change on someone, just kind of listen more.
Yeah, so what we framed was the pre-COE versus the post-COE. I was part of that whole transformation. Eric was hired after the COE was formed, and just understanding the pool of the team and who came from where and the challenges that those folks faced. So I maintained kind of the work I was doing. So my line of sight was a little bit different. I wasn't in a management role at that point. Eric came on board, I think, after the COE was formed, and then had to manage a team that had some people that were already kind of in their roles and some people that were being pivoted to this new role. I think that challenge was understanding why some people were more frustrated than others for Eric. I think that's probably what you were saying, Eric.
Yeah, I think some people were still in phases 1 and 2 and hadn't moved over to the yellow phase or the green phase yet. And they were just listening to what they had to say.
Nice. Very good. Yeah, does that ever take intention? That's why we're talking about this, because we have to do this intentionally, because some of that's really hard. All right, somebody else? What else did you all discover?
I think when we were talking, one thing that came up was changes first being announced sometimes in a more structured way. So an example for people on the call, like the Connect movement to home site, that was kind of, a lot of it's like rumblings versus like large announcements. And especially like as the change happens, like status updates, like being like, oh, okay, like every month there's a consistent way to see where we are progressing, or having a visual, like a roadmap to help kind of lead down that journey of change. Otherwise it kind of feels like stuck in like this stage.
Yeah. Oh, you bring up a really good point about ongoing communication. I mean, there's the initial announcement, and then there's all the other information people need along the way. And so having a plan for that, that's excellent. Very good. Anyone else?
We really hit on allowing for pause between the different cascade of communication. So if you have communication coming from the top down, ensuring that you have it cascade to your leaders, allowing them to move forward so that we could, like you emphasized at the beginning of the call, like having that 1 to 2 step head start on your team to help them in turn manage, so you're always a little bit advanced.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So suffice it to say, we've all experienced this, right? I mean, multiple times, I'm sure, just in our own work life or our life. And when we recognize that how things are initiated, while you're still going to go through stages 1, 2, and 3. I was working with a realtor, super positive woman, entrepreneurial, optimistic like crazy. And she kept saying to me, I don't go through stages 1, 2, and 3. I just skip right on to 4. I'm like, you do go through, we all go through them. We just might go through more quickly in certain types of changes, right? So you all know some that you've been like, oh, that makes sense. Boom, you're over on the other side. That can happen. But we all still go through the changes. It's not that red's bad. Red's necessary. And that's the part that sometimes we just have to remind ourselves of, to be patient in that process.
Jackie, do executives do they typically go through changes like really fast? Is that, some of this sort of executive resilience, or do you see across teams it's really just personalized?
Great question. Okay, so you have to start to look at who's drawn to an executive leadership. There might be some tendencies because they might be wired up to be more communicative, or they might be more risk taking because they're a big picture thinker or things like that also make it a little easier to change, versus some other styles that might be deep thinkers or process oriented, in which case that takes a little longer to move through some changes. But I mean, so I think there can be some element of that. However, it just all depends. You know, if any given person has a bunch of change going on at home, at the same time they're asked to make a bunch of change at work, it can derail us. I mean, it just really, there's so many variables that can, and that's why it is, there are times maybe you've even found yourself dragging your feet in a change situation, but you are normally a really good changer, right? And you can almost, has anybody ever experienced that? Where you found yourself getting stuck and you're almost like surprised by it? Like, why is it still bothering me? It might be the type of change. You know, I'm really great with people changes. I'm terrible with technology changes. My husband loves to buy me new technology, and he brings it in here and he starts telling me all the reasons he completely rewired my phone to work differently. And I'm like, ah. And so because I don't do that as well, but any people change I can do, you know what I'm saying? So it just depends. But I think people who step into leadership might be wired a little bit more to see the big picture, in which case their acceptance of something that's down the road might be enhanced by that. Good question.
Okay. You really could improve it over time, right? Because we're being exposed to more training and we're managing through change over and over again.
We're going to get in just a minute to the danger zone. You guys remember that? Okay. So when we get to that, you're going to start to see something about how in process improvement, like people do get better at change when they're around people who are better at change. So leaders, let me give you incredible hope here. You get your teams through some of this change kind of successfully, a few of them, and pretty soon the next time you announce a change, because it's gone off pretty well, people are more likely to want to go through this with you. There is some of that does really happen, that as we get better, people aren't as resistant because they've experienced positive stuff with us in the past with regard to change. That's a good thing. Okay, let's move now. Let me just recap our red stages, and these were spent the most time there because they're the most problematic. We want to be sure we avoid isolation. Okay, don't let people disappear, right? Because that's telling you something, that they're worried or afraid about something. Watch the us versus them mentality, that you can hear people, you know, why does this always happen to me? Why are they always doing these things? And so just be careful about when you hear some of that language, or when you can tell people are fighting to hang on to the old way instead of embracing the new way. And just keep articulating that more will stay the same than is changing. And sometimes people need to hear that over and over from their leader. So again, back to the red stages, it is all about communication. And so the more we do, the better it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our break right now, take our 5-minute break. We're going to come back. We're going to start right into stage 3, which is still, we're not going too fast here, but we've got to finish this one before we hop over that danger zone. So we'll talk specifically about those 2 pieces, and then you're going to notice a pretty good speed up as we head into stages 4, 5, and 6. All right, good. We'll see you in 5. See you back. Go ahead. Let's go ahead and start that. And as people, we're just going to talk for just a few more minutes while people are still getting lunch ready to go. But anybody have any thoughts or questions about those 2 early stages and any of the stuff that we've been discussing before we move into the yellow stages? Thoughts, comments, questions?
This is a little bit off topic, but Kelsey asked an interesting question about execs and change management. And I was reflecting on that on this break, because I would say among my peers, everyone is very different. We're all very different across. But I think one of the things that is different as you move up is I know my job is getting on board with the change. And I try to start in a place of, okay, I'm going to have to lead this for my team. What do I need to do to get myself on board? And what pieces of this can I get comfortable with? And how can I carry this message forward? because it's such a core expectation. There's only so much that I'm going to my leader and my leader's leader to truly go and ask 4,000 questions the same time over and over again. So you're just kind of in a different place. And I guess I would challenge all of us as leaders, when you have a change, if you start from a place of accountability, of needing to find a way to get on board, how does that change the kind of questions you're asking? And how does that change how you look at this cycle and say, what do I need to move forward, and push yourself to move forward, as opposed to what we often see with individual contributors that aren't leading the change, where they're just like, you're going to have to drag me through this because I'm going to resist. So just a different mindset and acceptance out of the gate. I don't know if anyone has thoughts or reactions to that, if that resonates with you.
Thank you. Heidi, anyone want to share? I will give you one just quick thing that I remember. Part of our comfort with change is also often connected to our perceived sense of control. And when you do step into a leadership position, either A, you were already somebody who kind of was wired up to take control. That's what attracted you maybe to leadership, or when you do step into leadership, you have a little bit more information flow. You might have, or at least feel that you have access to additional information, and might even feel like you have more control than somebody who isn't in that role. And so I think some of that, but the big piece that I heard you just say, Heidi, and so important, is we have to remember that once we step up front as leaders, how we handle it is being watched by our whole team. And so it is important, if we want to lead the way, to find what we need. And maybe you have more access to it because you've got your peers and other leaders close by to find out the information. But that's so important, because now your whole team's watching how you do it. And that's why we need to get as good as possible at it.
I was also like reflecting on the break that there's, I immediately go to top down change and I'm cascading information down, but there is actually bottom up change that we're also like cascading up too. And so, you think about the change. I don't know if I've ever thought about change curves up, I'm usually thinking about down to my employees, but there's also like, oh, gee, like this project didn't like land as we expected, and you're like, you're having to communicate that up, and how you talk about like there'll be the surprise and need a lot of information and whatnot. So I think it can kind of go all different ways, which is pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we'll get to that, but one thing that I think we have a lot of recent examples at the enterprise is when leaders or misread the room, or when you think people are in the discovery phase, you think people will be excited about it, and then you're just like, you were wrong. They're in the loss phase or doubt phase, and now to effectively go back and kind of change your whole plan because you just completely misread how people were expecting that change. So I don't know if we can cover that at some point, of like tips to do that when you realize you didn't have a good pulse on your team.
Yeah. Well, let me just address a little bit of it now, and then we'll come back to it if we can do some more. But just to recognize that we only know what we know, right? Even as leaders, you only know what you know, and this information around change is frustrating if you don't realize why people are acting and thinking and behaving the way they are. It's understandable to misread a room, because oftentimes, I don't know if you're this way, but as a leader, we get so enthusiastic about a change. We're so excited. We're over in stage 4. Why wouldn't everybody, and maybe even our own optimism causes us to misread the room, because we want, so recognizing now what you know, that there is a predictability to this, the way people internally manage change, helps to take away the right way and wrong way judgment on this. It just is. And so if we start to go, okay, everyone's going to go there, and so I'm looking for that, and then they're going to go here, and I'm looking for that, and they're going to go here. It just kind of eases the pressure on you about having to read it right or wrong. You're looking for what's predictable behavior in human beings around change. So that might ease a little bit now that you kind of have an understanding of what to expect. Does that make sense? Now, it's also interesting because a lot of times I'll do this, like I said, for the whole, it could be for your whole organization, so that they understand what they're doing. Or they understand what their coworkers are doing, or they understand the role they play because they're stuck in a stage or whatever. That can also help them understand it's not just that they're suddenly upset, that they're just in stage 1. But we are going to talk a little bit more about how we progress from this one side of the cycle to this other side. And if we find there's a division, what do we do about it? Did that answer that at all, Marc-Andre?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Really great discussion. Okay, so now let's move. So let's just say this. In an ideal world, let me just lay this out. In an ideal world, we wouldn't actually ask people to do the change until they got over into stage 5. I mean, that would be an ideal world. They'd have all the information, they did all the training, they'd go through all of that, they get it, and then they don't have to implement until they get over into stage 5. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen very often. And we get through stages 1 and 2, maybe, and then now people are trying to do the thing. So let me describe what the yellow stages are all about. And first off, just FYI, how quickly you go through those yellow stages is very dependent on how you also go through a yellow light. You know who you are. You know those people that, you know, wee through, and sometimes some of you are very cautious and do law-abiding and certainly put your foot on the brake. It just depends. These are yellow. You can start moving, but it just is going to depend on a lot of factors as to how quickly we can move through it. So just recognize that there's no right or wrong to it. But yellow, we do begin to see we're starting to make movement. We're just not go green, go, go, go. Okay, let's turn to page 36 and look quick at the overview of stage 3. Now, maybe they've gotten enough information, so they got the safety they needed in stage 1. They've collected enough information to go, all right, okay, I'm moving forward with it in stage 2. They got the information. Now they're in stage 3, but here's what stage 3 is like. Stage 3 is like wearing a new shoe. You know what it's like. You try it on at the store, everything's nice, you walk around, you're feeling good, but inevitably at the end of the first day, what's it feel like? Yeah, they hurt, right? I mean, because it's uncomfortable. People are just trying this thing out, whatever that is. I love that. It's hard. It's frustrating. And here's the double piece of it. If you're trying to do the new thing, what tends to happen is people haven't quite let go of the old thing. So the old thing's still on their plate, and then they're trying to put that new thing in there, and then and so it's no wonder it's awkward and clunky, because they're in the learning curve. Feelings are of anxiety, they get a little confused, and here's the kicker, leaders: productivity will naturally drop. It has to. Whenever anyone is learning something new, they can't do it as fast as they did the old thing. Okay, so productivity will drop. Now that starts then its own set of reactions to that. But here's what's happening. Because we're trying to do the thing, it feels a little like the problem is right here. It's like, I don't understand. I don't get it. It's taking me longer. I mean, like, for instance, I moved from one big city to another big city. It was my choice to move. We were so happy to come here. We moved from Texas, Dallas area, which was all on a grid, very easy to get around, to Georgia, which is all on hills. Everything goes diagonal and it's all named Peachtree. I was lost for months. I was so frustrated. And I was like, I was blaming the city planners. I'm blaming myself for not feeling confident. And I just didn't. So that's stage 3. You know, you're trying it, but it can feel very clunky. The frustration is coming from just not knowing. And what we can overuse is getting overwhelmed. Like if we get too deep in it, maybe you recall this if you were working in the office and then you started working at home. At the very beginning of that, it was weird and clunky, wasn't it? I mean, I heard a whole lot of like pushback on, I can't do this, I can't. And then pretty soon, so we'll talk about that. But here's the deal. You don't want anyone to stay too long in this overwhelmed state because people start to sink into overwhelmed depression and even despair. We saw that happen. And so it's so important what people need. Does anybody remember when they're in stage 3, discomfort and frustration, what do they need? Does anyone recall? What is it they're telling us they need? Come on, what do you think, guys? You remember? You saw it in the overview.
Patience?
No, close. Now, here's what they need. They need motivation. Okay, so write it on your sheet. If that didn't come easy to remember, put it on somewhere, stage 3, what they're telling us because they're overwhelmed and they're overworried, blah, blah, they're needing motivation. So let's talk about that for just a second. What's driving people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors when they're in stage 3, it feels clunky, it's a little bit painful, and they're way slower at it than they used to be. They're frustrated, overwhelmed, confused, and actually get lethargic. Can anybody remember this from early on in the pandemic? Does anybody remember being like super tired? Like it's like even getting out of bed was like, it felt like, okay, that's stage 3. It's like we didn't, and that's normal for stage 3. We just don't have enough kind of pick me up, and we're trying hard, but here's what happens. If you're the leader and you start to see productivity drop, what's the natural inclination? What, Althea, unmute and say what you just said.
I was just saying to manage, like to really address the performance and really focus on that versus really addressing the real issue, the root cause of it. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, because we can kind of panic just a little bit. We can be like, okay, what's happening here? So you must not be working hard enough. So, listen, let's just say this. You also do this to yourself. If suddenly you can't produce as much as you're used to, you can start going, okay, I just got to stay longer. I got to work harder. Now, if you do that too long or your folks do that, what starts to happen or what could happen if they just try to work harder and stay later? What could happen? They do what?
Burnout.
They burn out. Did we not see that? I mean, we saw there. There's a whole bunch of people who you all heard about the Great Resignation who said, life's too short, and they left the workplace. And so it's so important for us to recognize when people get into stage 3 or when you are in stage 3, what you're saying is, I need some motivation. I really need a break. Okay, so let's talk about just a couple things. We're not going to read through these, but would you? So look at the sheet where it says to know more, notice more. Here's what it says. I love this part. Even highly organized, normally energetic people can sink into sloth in stage 3. You're clearer on the change, but waiting for motivation. Here are some signs. So real quick, look through and unmute and just holler out which ones of these you've seen. So look through. It starts out with worried about the future. Any of them? Either you felt them or have you seen them most? What do you think? How about easily distracted? Squirrel. Yeah, I mean, did you not feel that?
Unable to prioritize.
Yeah.
Okay. Huge. And we're going to talk specifically about that. It's just that, you still don't quite know which direction to head. And so you kind of find yourself spinning around just a little bit, like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And so it's no wonder. Look at that, hear this. Language from people who are struggling in stage 3. I just don't care. I feel overwhelmed and tired all the time. I'm really nervous about the future here. No matter how much I work, they expect more. This is useless. I mean, here's the other thing that shows up is people tend to become, who are normally pretty neat and tidy, can kind of get like, whatever, things kind of pile up, or a room that normally is neat and tidy are like, I don't care. Anybody ever experience that? So those kinds of things tell you or someone is in stage 3. So I want you to look now at the bottom. You and I each have, all of us have different levels of maybe skill or focus that we tend to bring to bear when times like this are happening. And so, Benjamin, would you do me a favor? Would you read, it's called the 5 Ps. Would you read through what these 5 are? And everyone else, would you listen to hear which one you tend to go toward in times like these? Would you read those?
I'm sorry, can you tell me what page I'm on? We're on.
Okay, page 36. And it's the very bottom of the sheet where it says, after start small, it says the 5 Ps. Do you see that?
Sure, yeah. 5 Ps: patience, perspective, persistence, play, purpose, practice them.
Yeah.
So
read
patience
through them. Yeah, go ahead.
takes time to assimilate change. Remember, the tortoise won the race because the hare went out too fast. That's why.
That's right.
Perspective, the change fog has lifted. No scenic overlook yet, but a clear road. Persistence, maintain for a level of activity that keeps people focused and moving, not robotic. Play, what might give people an unexpected boost. Lighten the mood, now is the time. Purpose, remind everyone of the organization's values.
Okay, so what do you think? Which one do you tend to, when you can tell people are in this place, which one do you tend to go to help them? Leaders, what do you got? Scott, what about you? Where do you tend to go?
Patience, I'd say, and persistence, kind of, just being present, being there, but understand it takes some time.
Yeah, very good. Ryan, what about you? Where do you go?
I kind of go to play, I guess, a lot. I just like to be a little bit lighthearted about it and just, I don't know, kind of lighten the mood.
Very good, very good. Naomi, what about you?
I tend to go to patience as well.
Very good, very good. And so can you see how we all go a little to maybe different places? Anybody else want to share one where you go? I tend to go toward play too. I tend to go, okay, let's get out of the office, or let's go somewhere and do something, or whatever it is to try to kind of break the anxiety or overwhelm or frustration somebody might be feeling. If you want to flip to the next page, and let's look again at how we're needing to either manage tasks and results or manage people. So Joe, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. Would you read those 2 boxes, what it says there about what we should be doing in stage 3?
So under managing tasks and results, high direction, assist with determining priorities, provide accurate and relevant information, and set clear goals.
Okay.
Under managing people, high encouragement, praise, compliment, finish tasks, link tasks to the big picture, facilitate useful mental distractions.
Okay, so let's talk about the first part right here about high direction, assist with determining priorities. I know some of you already mentioned that. Hey, listen, let me just say this. I would never, ever, ever suggest that you micromanage people, except here. I mean, seriously, when people are feeling overwhelmed, they just want to just tell me what to do, and so encourage them to come to you with what they feel like is on their plate, and then you can go through and say, okay, those 3 things, those we need to keep doing. Let's just set these other 2 things aside and we'll get back to those, but just focus on these 3. They will be so grateful if you could just help, because even decision making when someone's overwhelmed is hard. So the more you can assist them on what really are the priorities right now, because they're in the learning curve still, that's huge. Now, what do you think about the whole praise and compliment finished tasks? Jolie, what do you think about that?
I'm sorry, I got distracted for a second because someone joined a meeting I just canceled. So
gosh, okay.
I was trying to make sure they knew that. But so I missed, what was the question?
The question is, so if you can see up on the screen, one of the things under managing people has to do with praise and compliment. Now, the reason I'm asking this question about what do you think about that is sometimes leaders, I mean, I know how I feel sometimes. I'm like, look, I don't need to be praising them for every little thing they're doing. They're just doing their job. So why would I need to do this now? So what do you think about that whole suggestion during stage 3? Of giving lots of praise and compliments for just even finishing tasks.
I mean, I think it can still help put additional motivation on them, keeping up their energy. So they're feeling more confident, and, it can go a further way at that point. Maybe you wouldn't compliment them on those things if they weren't going through this as much, but helps give them additional motivation and that positive feedback in another way when they're maybe kind of going through this discomfort.
Yeah, very good. I mean, honestly, guys, especially if you have really seasoned people, you might think you just don't need to do this, but I'm just sharing when they're in this stage, it may be the wee little baby steps that they're taking that you want to just call attention to. Good job, good job. So, there's 2 kinds of motivation. There's results-based and there's activity-based. And the activity-based is looking for the things they complete and you just praise them on those things versus waiting for the end result to happen, because you need to get them across that finish line. And this is a time where those little baby steps and praises can make a big difference.
Jackie, I can tell you that in our part of the organization, we actually have a rewards and recognition program. I think it's been stellar. So it's actually a routine thing that we do in rewarding IC workflow and stuff like that. So I think it's a great idea. So
yeah. Excellent. Well, keep that up and maybe just breathe a little extra life into it when people are in this stage, because it's baby steps and there's just something accumulative about praise around the baby steps when they're first learning them that really continues to build momentum. Thank you, Bob. That's excellent. Yes, Tish.
I know, right? I'm so excited to share. I just had to raise my hand.
I love that.
It really hits home because when you think about receiving praise when you're experiencing discontent or uncertainty, it also ensures that that person is your partner through this uncertainty. So like, I recognize that we may need to change our focus or reprioritize, but I'm here for you. I believe in you and we will manage through this. So just.
Yeah, because what are you sending the message when you come alongside them or give them a little extra time to do something or praise those wee little things because they're new to them? What does that say to them about you?
Right, it's taking away some of that fear for them. It should say that we are in this together, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And so that's all connected with our possible reaction to watching productivity drop. Right, leaders? Because we just have to recognize that's part of the learning curve. So if you look at the managing self one-on-one and team on page 37, let's just look at this. There really still is lots of communication needing to happen here. But the communication now, instead of about the change, might be more focused on the frustrations they're having. Like, they're trying to do the thing and they might need a little more assistance in that. So if you look under managing others, Wendy, would you mind reading what it says under managing others one-on-one and team? What are we doing here in stage 3?
One-on-one, we are asking what are your greatest frustrations, offer how you or others could be resources, help identify tasks that are vital and those that could be temporarily postponed, provide clear priorities.
Very good.
And under team, have regularly scheduled team meetings, provide direction for tasks in small chunks with timeframes, find ways to create formal and informal mental distractions, and micromanage by being attentive to details and timelines.
Yeah. Your presence in the first 2 stages really is to provide reassurance and additional information. Your presence in stage 3 might get more specific about the task, giving them the resources, a little extra hand, a little extra focus. And I will just say, if food is involved, that's always a winner. right? I know it sounds funny, but it's one of those things where, you know, if there's a heavy workload in a particular week, you guys probably already do this. Maybe you bring in lunches for a few days or something like that. That actually works. It really gives people that extra something that they can look forward to. Or even if you just go on a walk around the building or get out or something, it can rejuvenate in a big way. So here are questions that we're asking. You can see these at the bottom of page 37. What are our current priorities? What's specific? Baby step, like what do I actually need to do? What has to be done? And then stage 3 is one of those where you want to encourage your team members to ask for help. Now, who are they going to get help from? You. But here's where this is where we can start to partner together. If you've got somebody who makes it over to stage 5, like they're ahead of this and they get over to stage 5, they are absolutely a perfect choice to bring back to people in stage 3 and mentor a partner, right? They're just a little bit farther ahead. They're kind of accomplishing things. You'll see why in a minute, but that's perfect. You've got someone farther ahead, bring them back, partner them with someone who's still maybe struggling to try to learn the thing. Any thoughts about that? Okay, flip the page to page 38, and here's just a couple of things you just need to recognize. It's all around navigate the productivity lapses. I mean, it's going to happen. And so you need to be prepared for that and figure out, you know, how can you mitigate anything or minimize, try to keep that as short as possible. But that may mean extra effort on our part, being there to provide more training and support and that kind of thing. And keep talking to people so they continue to stay focused and motivated. Remember, being really easily distracted when you're overwhelmed is so easy to do, right? Or we tend to go, oh, this is too hard. And we go over to the thing we know like the back of our hand that we really shouldn't be spending time on right now, but it's certainly a lot easier than this other thing. So we tend to go get that done instead. Anybody? Anyone? Okay. So we have to, it's almost like we have to keep going. Okay. Here we are. Maybe you have a meeting in the morning during a week or two of this going on. Maybe you have a little huddle in the morning, just a quick, if you don't already do that, instead of waiting for a weekly meeting. All it is to provide a little support and ideas, those kinds of things. Under success strategies, keep up the formal and informal communication. Keep praising the little accomplishments and completions. And the third one, I love this, be prepared to have some planned and spontaneous distractions. I mean, we've all heard of companies like, you know, Microsoft or Google or whatever, and they end up having marshmallow fights. You know what I'm talking about? You guys heard of these things, right? Okay, those kinds of things came along because they were in a really intense work environment and they were looking for something fun to do. I don't know, has anybody, you guys ever done anything like that that's just kind of like fun? I'm just curious. Anybody? Stopped and played a game or did something?
Well, we have, again, in our part of the org, we have a fun committee, and fun committees puts up some activities. We have bingo going on right now. In fact, in some of the team's chats, we hear people talking about their bingo strategy and stuff. So that is kind of what you're talking about, I think. So yeah, we have those sorts of things, I think. Happy hours, virtual happy hours, is another one we do a lot. I think those are good.
Nice. Yeah. Well, that's the kind of thing. And so just pay attention to when you might want to add an extra one in because they need it, right? They need a little break. And so let's turn over to the next page and look at our to-do list. Now, this is number 1 here. Plan that there's not only going to be a drop in productivity, but there's an increase in absenteeism. People start getting really tired and then they think, oh, maybe I'm going. And so that could happen. Just be aware that that's really just saying, and so what can you do to come behind that person and bolster them? At the same time, you still have to get work done. So you want to keep them focused on hitting the deadlines that do need to be hit. And so as much as possible. Now, here's a deal. You've got to you got to stick with it. There might still be some whining and complaining a little bit and like, oh, this is hard. Okay, but I know, but you can do it. We're headed there. Pretty soon this is going to be just as easy as the other program was. You got to keep them moving forward. And if there's anything, and I honestly think this is a number one task of a leader, is it's almost like we need to be a snowplow out in front of them, clearing out any obstacles. It's like if there's anything that's making their thing that they have to learn harder, I'm getting in front of them and trying to anticipate and get it out of the way. Does that resonate with anybody? Yeah, just so we're trying to alleviate anything excess. So during this learning curve period, and maybe it's only a couple days, maybe it's a week or two, that we're like, okay, here's the deal. We got to get this thing learned. I'm taking everything else off your plate for now so you can totally focus. So a couple things just to make sure we avoid. Watch allowing people to do extra hours, because that's this. You do not want them to burn out. And so just be aware if you start to find somebody to do that. And it mentions the same couple of things, assuming that productivity will stay the same, etc. All right, so we get what we need to be doing. Let's look back down to the action plan. I want you to go back to that original change, take just a couple minutes, and we're going to head to the danger zone in just a second. Go ahead. All right. All right, so just a couple of notes about this portion of the yellow stage. This first stage 3 is under promise and over deliver. You know, really, and begin to look at your team and say, all right, how can I recharge them? You know, what can we do to come alongside? They still have to get the job done. They still need to get through this learning curve. What can I do to bolster them and help recharge them? That would be our leadership mission when they're in stage 3, not letting them off the hook or, you know, letting them do whatever. We're keeping them focused, but we're doing it recognizing productivity had to drop so they could learn this thing, and we're ready to bolster. Any questions about stage 3 there? Make sense? Okay. All right. So here's where just a couple of quick questions. What will your clues be that people are in stage 3? Just real quick to unmute for just a minute and shout out. What are your clues are that they're in stage 3?
Lack of energy.
Lack of energy. Yeah. Maybe they're dragging into work, or they don't come.
Spinning on priorities and jumping from one thing to another and not getting a thing done, or working on knocking out the small to-do list and focusing on the easy stuff.
Yeah. We can see when people, I mean, you know, when you've been in it, right? And so we can see when people are. So the 2 questions you would have to answer is, what can we specifically do to prepare and manage for this when we hit stage 3? And how do we manage the absenteeism or lost productivity. Now, some of this is the more we tell our team, hey, you're going to feel this way, be ready for it. That helps too. That gives them a heads up that what they're about to feel, which is a little overwhelmed, is normal. Of course, every time you've ever learned anything, you probably felt that way in the beginning. So asking these questions and keeping them focused is an important thing. Okay, before we head into the danger zone, I want you to read something real quick. So now, if you wouldn't mind, feel free to snap a screenshot or take a picture of this. But I want you just to take a moment to read a scenario and what you would do if you were Deborah's leader. All right, anybody still need more time to read through it? Okay, leaders, just at first blush, and you just now seen this, what would you do? Someone give me a suggestion of how you might react. What's your plan for Deborah?
I think my initial reaction, I feel like having seen some stuff like this before, is asking Deborah what was done, learning trying to learn from Deborah, because I've totally been in scenarios where change was happening as people said this and they were just viewed as a negative Nancy, but they were right in the end, So I would say, Deborah, how can you teach me so we can inform the change? And hopefully if we inform it well enough, you'll be sold, or we'll have prevented a bad change.
Yes. Okay, good. Any other feedback? Very good. Any other feedback? What would you do?
I think maybe go back a little further and ask how she's feeling about the fact that her old boss isn't there anymore. And does she, I don't know the story about why that person isn't there, but does that cause concern for her? Does she think maybe why ever he or she left, that might happen to her?
Very good. Okay, so hang on. I want to show you a little, almost like a process that you can follow. That anytime you're observing where somebody is and you're a little baffled by it, here's what you're doing. Now, you guys already do this unconsciously, but I want you to be deliberate now, knowing what you know. So you were all reading through it, so you were kind of assessing where Deborah was, right? Okay, now my question to you is, what stage do you think she was in and why? Yes, Tish, did you?
Stage 2.
You think she was in stage 2? Why? Because what gave you the indication?
Because she's skeptical.
Yes. Okay. Okay, could be. Anybody else? What do you think? Micah, what about you? Where do you think Deborah is?
Long dramatic pause.
What do you think? What stage do you think she's in?
If she's still doing stuff, I would say one of those 2 yellow ones. She's at least not super angry.
Okay. Anybody else have feedback for that? Good. Kurt, what do you think?
I'd say probably the stage 3, the discomfort. So kind of you can see the lack of motivation, but and used to be a high performer, but you're seeing kind of a lack of motivation and kind of the silence or kind of criticism. So Probably
Okay,
did not comfortable with the situation.
okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? So am I hearing 2 or 3? Is everybody kind of in that, probably in that, those two, either one of those 2 buckets? Yes? Okay, so now what would you prescribe? What's the best course of action or intervention? Either one, and they would probably have a little different intervention on your part, but what would we prescribe? Kelsey, what do you think?
I guess I'm still debating between the 2 or 3, but I guess I was kind of thinking she was more in the 3, so I would be trying to figure out what give her like the times where she's exhibiting behaviors that are heading in the right direction. I just like really call that out as like awesome or good job, or things where she gets stuck, and it could be a small thing that she goes to me for as a new manager, but like I'm right there to kind of show her that I can help clear that roadblock, or, you know, just be a person for advice. So like you kind of break the ice a bit. So that's where I was thinking she was in 3.
Okay, very good. And so Dale, thank you for, he wrote in there about help her focus and prioritize. Okay, excellent. Anyone else? Well, what would Betsy, what would you prescribe?
I don't know that I have anything different. I think like I really liked what William said about like listening. You know, like why does she think the old ways are better, or what have we tried before? To put her in that position of like the expert and having people, you know, look to her still.
So leaders, this is what we one-on-one will find ourselves needing to do, regardless of whether they're in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. We start to observe what the behavior is, hearing the language, now knowing what we know, we begin to go, okay, so what is that telling me? Are they in stage 1, in which case they need what? Stage 1, they need what? What do people need in stage 1? Safety, okay. Or they're in stage 2, and so when they're in stage 2, they're telling us they need more what?
Information.
Information, very good. Or they're in stage 3 and they're overwhelmed, and so they need a little bit more motivation. Good job. See, you're getting so that, but that's part of what knowing this as a leader helps us begin to do. We begin to go, okay, I'm assessing this. You guys already do this. You know, you may not just call them these, but let's become real intentional around paying attention, especially when we know change is going on. How can we assess where they are? How can we kind of diagnose what stage they're in so we know what they might need, and then come up with a prescription for it? And it sounds like, and in every case, your examples means you have to connect with them. I mean, even if you don't know exactly what to say, you're connecting with them starts to acknowledge, I see that you're, you know, feeling strongly, or whatever that is, and you're asking questions and you're present. That alone, even if you don't have all or whatever the words that you feel like you just being there to say, listen, this has probably been really hard. Your boss left. I can't even imagine. That's really tough. You know, I mean, even those kinds of compassionate thoughts around what change might be like for her, especially since she knew she was a high performer, right? Wow, we want to come alongside her. Okay, so do you get the process? Assess, diagnose, and prescribe is really going to be how you're going to come alongside people who aren't moving maybe as much, or you want to encourage to move more quickly. All right, so that giving you a little bit of like to-dos when you notice what you notice. I want to talk about this thing called the danger zone. And are any of you singing that song in your head right now? I thought so. Okay, so here's the deal. And you, I'm sure you picked this up in the overview, but the point with this is, and then we'll take our break, is that during stage 3, when productivity drops and people are overwhelmed, and it feels very heavy, you're trying to, and clunky, trying to get the thing done, there is an overwhelming pull to quit. Okay, even if you and I, maybe we picked this thing, maybe we decided we wanted to go on an exercise plan or eating right or whatever. And stage 3 is like, I can't stand this, is terrible. I can't do it. We want to quit, right? In our work world, especially leaders, when productivity drops, it can be really easy to go, uh-oh, we must have made a what? A mistake, right? Oh my gosh, maybe we made a mistake. Look at productivity. It's dropped down. Uh-oh. And then we decide if we made a mistake, we now need to tweak it. Anybody? Now, what's another word for the word tweak?
Change.
Change. So here's what happens. Please now recognize that you may have to tweak something, but don't do it now. Wait, I'll tell you where you can do it. In stage 3, you just don't have enough information. We have not completed far enough along. And if we change here, if we tweak it, here's what happens. It throws everyone right back up into what? Stage 1. Now, here's what happens. Every one of us, and I promise you, every single person on your team, in our families when we were growing up, you likely knew exactly how long you would need to drag your feet to get your parents to change their mind on something. Did you not? Right? Okay, your kids know it about you too, but your team knows it too. They know, unconsciously even, that if they drag their feet just long enough and you fall into stage 3, panic and tweak or change or reverse something, it will stop the progress. And so here's what we need to recognize. No wonder there are a lot of people, especially when they get to stage 3 and then they quit. And then they go back up, make a change. No, I mean, no wonder there's a whole lot of the population who hates change. If all you ever experience is stages 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that's horrible. You have to stay the course. Later, if you need to update something because it didn't quite work out, you'll have this opportunity. You need to stay the course. And the analogy I always give is like, if you're ever installing, okay, IT people, if you're ever installing something on your computer, are you supposed to be messing with the computer while it's installing? I was always told absolutely not, because you could mess things up. Leave it alone. And here's the good news. Your movement from stage 3 discomfort over to stage 4 discovery can literally happen overnight. Just like that program that once it installs, ding, all of a sudden it's accessible. Tell me if you've ever experienced this. That you one day you're like, oh, you're in the doldrums or you're not getting things done. And one day you go home, maybe you go home early, right? You're like, oh, and then you get a really good night's sleep. Anybody ever had this happen? You get a really good night's sleep and you wake up the next morning and you're like, huh, I actually feel a little bit better about this, right? That's you moving from stage 3 to stage 4. Okay, that's suddenly beginning to go, oh, a little bit of this thing is lifting off of me. And the only way that you can see that, the benefit of that is if you stay the course. Leaders, when you've initiated something, it's so important to keep giving them what they need to keep progressing. You continuing to stay the course, here's the best part. All it takes is you doing that and them coming through to this better feeling side of change with you over and over again. If they can do that at least a couple of times, what's going to happen the next time you initiate a change? Aren't they going to feel better than they would have if they knew the last time you quit? Do you see how that can really that can really benefit us if we can get that experience they're now having with you as the leader as being a really positive one? Because even though it was hard, even though we had to persevere, it made up for it in the end. We got it done. Wow, what a great way for people to feel. So speaking of how people feel, I want to give you a chance to take a break. This is our last one, and when we come back, we're going to go through stages 4, 5, and 6 again a little bit quicker, and we'll be able to relate it to exactly what you guys are going through. Any thoughts or questions? We okay? Everybody okay? Good. See you back in 5. Do you all hear that? When I press that button that says recording in progress? Okay. I never know for sure if
Yeah,
that's just on my end. All righty. All right. So any thoughts or questions before we move on to stage 4? With 1, 2, and 3? Do you see why we spent more time on those? Takes a little more guidance, a little more forethought, a little more patience for all of us. All right. Okay, so let's turn to page 40. So now we're starting on that sort of left side of the cycle, and we've made it through the danger zone. We stayed the course. We said, let's go. And here's what's so different. I mean, look at the difference in the dominant emotion. I mean, consider that we just left discomfort and frustration and fear and anger and all that. Hope. Oh my gosh. Hope. I mean, suddenly, where before it felt like the problem was here, suddenly people are starting to feel solutions. You know, now you start to like, oh, now I get, I see. So the feelings are beginning to go, wait a minute. Okay, hold on. I think I got this just a little bit. Now, here's the deal. Just FYI, you may not like this change still. I mean, for instance, nobody liked the pandemic. I mean, nobody wanted that. But when you start to go, okay, wait a minute, hold on. How can I, I feel like I might be dealing with this a little better, a little differently. That's where the anticipation and the thoughts become more resourceful. So you begin to go, okay, wait a minute, hang on a second. I think I can come up with something. And the behavior becomes energized. It is so much better. I mean, just getting that move over to stage 4. Here's what's so important. Lots of enthusiasm here, lots of brainstorming and things like this. And that energy boost you feel can be so tempting to think, this is great. I'm going to camp out right here. This is perfect. I can stay here forever. Right. So that's the only downside of stage 4 is it feels so good. You want to just like make this thing last. And so it's super important that we begin to help to fine tune. When somebody gets in this stage, they're coming up with great ideas. They got lots of perspective. I mean, they're looking for different ways they can do things. And again, can tend to, because we're not done yet, can tend to get stuck there. So what do people, does anybody recall, what do people need when they get to stage 4? It feels great, but what do they still need to keep moving? Does anybody recall?
Perspective.
Perspective is part of it. That's absolutely it. But perspective helps them make a
clear decision.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. That's it. No, seriously. They're so excited about brainstorming different ideas that that they have to narrow down. You can't take action until you make a decision. And so where it says the opportunity is on upgrading your decision-making strategy. I mean, that really is helpful. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'll give you an example of this. Tell me if this resonates with you. Have you ever been to a really super fun brainstorming meeting, right? I mean, everybody's churning out great ideas and you've got Post-it notes rolling and it's all good. I mean, you're just like loving it. And then you leave the meeting and you go, did we make a decision on any of that? Anybody ever experienced that? Right? I mean, it feels like the brainstorming is the decision, but it really isn't. You gotta, like, we gotta weed through all those great ideas, and if we don't narrow down and then move something, one piece or a couple pieces forward, we're not making progress. Well, that's stage 4. It's beautiful because it's so much better than the other ones, but we want to make sure we keep it moving and narrow down. So this, Eric, is what you were talking about. What's driving people here is hope and perspective. Like they're now on this kind of other side. They've been through the learning curve and they're like, okay, hang on. And so people are loving the fact they've got options. and they could see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not quite there yet. But but there's a whole lot more energy toward it. So if you look on page 40, what's interesting here is once you get people over into stage 4, where you needed to be a lot more participative and hand-holding, you can start to back off on that a little bit, right? You're going to more facilitate them in doing some things like brainstorming, for example, but you don't have to be really all that, you know, you don't have to, they're starting to do things on their own now. And that's a beautiful thing. So to know more, notice more, look down at the list for just a minute. And you can see it says they feel energized, starting to kind of like have a gung-ho attitude, like, wow, this is good. A little more eager. They're starting to go, okay, I could accept a goal right now. I could handle that. Tell me what you want me to accomplish, those kinds of things. Options, all of that we start to see people wanting that, and the interaction is around that. So what you would be hearing, it's changed a little bit, and they're starting to say things like, well, okay, so I get it. I'm seeing, you know, seeing some options, or I can see how I need to reprioritize. All of those kinds of comments are going to be pretty clear. What's happening here is people are getting perspective. It's starting to pull together, and much more focus on innovation, like ways we can improve things. It's a great time for you to start to have discussion around, you know, okay, we could start discussing, is this working exactly the way we want it to? You could begin to look at some options on that. So important for us to do that. Michelle, would you read what's now happening with our managing tasks and results and managing people?
What's on the screen?
Yeah, that's great.
So moderate discussion, give guidelines to teams, create a decision-making process, managing people, high encouragement and facilitation. So facilitating brainstorming, process ideas completely, encourage new options or ideas, individual strengths, sharing perspectives, lots of encouragement seems to be the theme.
Yes. Yeah. See, so now you're kind of just able to continue to bolster them and let them go. You know, you can now the one piece though, if you look under managing tasks and results, when I say create a decision-making process, what would be included in that? Like if they're having these big or big brainstorming meetings, and you don't want to discourage anybody, because what are the rules about brainstorming?
Every idea is a good idea.
There you go. You want those juices flowing. Let's keep that rolling. However, you have to put some boundaries or handlebars around how they would decide which one of those great ideas could be used. What goes into that? Anybody want to throw up? Like, what would be criteria to make a decision? Joe, what do you think?
Sorry, I got pinged. I'm sorry. I missed the question.
That's okay. So here it is when you're wanting to ask your team to make a decision around, let's say they've got a group of ideas that they've just brainstormed, what would be a criteria by which they could actually make a decision? What elements might go into that?
Like what goals and objectives you have, what you're trying to accomplish, and yeah, prioritizing what's the most important to the group.
Okay, very good. So if there's already goals and things that you're already having to accomplish and what's important to the group, that might be one of the criteria. Does anyone else have another one?
Yeah, I think resources and capabilities of the ideas.
Absolutely. So, you know, they call it the triple constraint: money, time, manpower, those kinds of things that may make one idea possible and another idea like, oh no, not this year. So that's part of what you can start to do. You can let them loose on coming up with the great ideas, but give them a little bit of that decision, because if decision making is what they need to move on, give them a little help with that part. Does that make sense, leaders? So give them the parameters, because you don't want them to get a great idea way down the road and you go like, no, can't do. That's not what we want to do. Give them that criteria coming out of the gate. So with managing self and managing one-on-one and team, now you start getting to do some really cool stuff, especially one-on-one and team. this is what you just mentioned, Brad, about that resources and who's on the team or what project they're working on. Start tapping into people's strengths, helping them identify where they're coming across and what they can do and add to and benefit whatever the idea or decision you're making. So if you can look down on that one-on-one, assist in identifying strengths, brainstorm possible solutions, encourage that out of the box thinking. That's part of what we've just been through a big thing. We're still trying to finish it. We could use some additional ideas and energy. Everybody see that? Hang on just a second, I'll let Kelsey in. And so here's what's happening now. These are the questions that you can help them focus on. Bottom of page 41. What are our next best steps? Like, okay, what are we going to do next? You came up with these great ideas. What's next? What happens if we take those steps? What would happen if we don't? So this might be helping them make decisions with a risk analysis involved. You're used to all of that, but sometimes these great ideas, we want to run through that same criteria. Okay, so here's just turning to page 42, just a couple of things with strategic communication. Lots of positive reinforcement. They're doing it. You don't even have to be present on these meetings that they're brainstorming. Give them an area or an idea or something to tackle and let them roll. Give credit to them for doing it. Man, there's a phrase that is, whatever you focus on expands. If you want more of great behavior from someone on your team, highlight that, thank them for it, give them credit to it, shine a light on it, and they'll tend to want to do it again, right? So give them credit. And this last, what does transparent decision making, what is that even? Eric, how would you define that?
Making a decision where everybody's involved in it.
Okay, yep, everybody's involved in it. And if they can't all be involved in the decision making, at least it's one where everyone can see what's going on. Like the criteria in the decision is wide open. And maybe if they aren't involved directly in the decision, maybe they're involved in how we're going to make the decision, right? At least the parameters around it. So that's part of what this is stage 4 is all about, figuring out what we can do to say, yes, great ideas. Now, here's the kind of little boundaries around which decision, it's wide open. You can see that that's what we're going to make this decision on. Pick the one you like the most. So a few, again, success stories around solutions and brainstorming. So if you can see all of that, those are excellent ways to say, go, go, go. And then in the to-do and the best to avoid list, stay innovative, keep them rolling on it. They love, I mean, again, energy's going. If there's some old tired policy or something like that, you're like, maybe it's not even related to the change that just went through, but they got some, energy around brainstorming. Toss that one in there too. Let them tackle that. I mean, that because this group is going to be, really warmed up on the brainstorming part. I love this best to avoid a buffet mentality. In other words, don't feel like you have to become overly accommodating. Give them the handlebars because we need to pick something. Give them the criteria and help them. The problem with stage 4 again is we get stuck because there's almost like too many choices. And we get a little overwhelmed and we never narrow it down and then nothing happens. So it's important for you to help them pull that together. So look at the bottom of page 43, action plan. This go back to your change and imagine you're now at stage 4 and just we're going to take 2 minutes to look at these questions and answer them. Take a second to do that. All right. One quick note that's indicative of stage 4. It is better to be done and moving than it to be perfect. Okay, so the way perfectionism can stand in our way here. We just need to keep the momentum moving and we can continue to make process improvements as we go, but helping them narrow down and move it forward is more important than it being perfect. And so let's keep it going on. And I'm going to give you one big point of encouragement. Leaders, get this. If you can get at least 60% of your team over into stage 4, you will complete the change. Everybody with me on that? If you can get, because here's what happens. 60% will get over to this stage and you continue to help them moving forward. And what will happen next is somewhere between 10 and 12% will come over almost intangibly after that. Right? Because their friends are over there and they're starting to walk, they're kind of being led by proxy because the 60% already headed over, right? And so that will pull them. Just FYI, there's still going to be some stragglers. There will always be a lag of a certain small percentage, and there might be 1 or 2% who aren't going to come no matter what you do. Okay, and that's okay. That's okay. There might have to be decisions around that, but that's normal. So you keep them moving and they will begin to pull each other across as well. And again, there are some people that just lag on a lot of things because it's in their nature to be super cautious and resist that. And so we just want to keep them moving over. So 60%, 6 out of 10, moving them over. That's where we're headed. Okay. So I want to just encapsulate these yellow stages. It's about, especially this part of it, in stage 3, it was about staying the course and getting over that danger zone. And now it's about making a decision and taking it forward, even if it isn't perfect. Any thoughts or questions about those yellow stages? Because we're headed into our final 2, and these will go quick because they go quick. Anybody? Okay, so here we go. Just to give you a description, the red stages that we went through early, they help you deal with what was, right? That's where we're still kind of stuck in the other way and it's difficult. Yellow stages, though, we begin to assimilate what is now and what's starting ahead. And green stages really are about seeing the bigger picture. That's where we begin to make peace with the change. And I say it that way because, again, you may still not like this change, but you've made peace with it, right? And so you're moving ahead. Let's go on to the green stages. So turn to page 44. Okay, so these are now, let me just say something about stage 5. Stage 5 is amazing. When you arrive in stage 5, you're doing the thing. Whatever the thing is you're starting to do it and you got a lot of confidence around it and a lot of competence, right? You took the ideas, you put them into a decision, you moved it forward, and now you're doing the things. Look at the dominant emotion. I mean, determination. The feelings are of confidence, people are really pragmatic, and here's the best part. All that productivity you lost in stage 3, more than made up for in stage 5. Right? You now have supercharged them because they get it. They understand it. They're feeling very accomplished during this. All right. Now, you may say, well, okay, if that's all going on, aren't we done? You got to keep them going because it's still new to them. It's not just the way things are, which is what stage 6 is. We need to keep them focused. So there are a couple things we have to keep in mind. Sometimes people kind of think they've already arrived and some pride can get in the way. And I'll give you an example. Has anybody ever lost 10 pounds and then gained them back? Anyone? Oh, some of you all are lying. Okay, well, you know what I mean though, right? Okay, so you do something and then suddenly you backslide. Well, here's what can happen. For instance, let's say I lost 10 pounds and now maybe I've got new outfits on and maybe I get compliments from people, and those are what we'd call features. right? They're external, they're temporary, but I'm enjoying that. That's wonderful. And then pretty soon the clothes aren't new anymore and nobody really notices anymore, right? And all that goes away. And then I can kind of lose my focus on it, pretty soon backslide, and there come the 10 pounds again. The reason that often happens is because I was focused on the features and not the benefits. Because in 10 pounds, losing 10 pounds, what would be the benefit to me? Like, give me an example. Like what are we talking about?
More energy.
More energy. Very good.
Healthier.
Yeah, healthier, lower cholesterol. Those are more lasting, and they are more internal. Those are the reasons we did things. So leaders, even when you get people over here to stage 5, what we need and what they need. Now, remember in stage 4, they needed to make a decision. When they get to stage 5 and they're doing the thing, they have to, and you want to guide them to stay focused on the benefits. Okay, so that's what we need when we get to stage 5, is we need focus on the benefits. What's driving people here is confidence and productivity. They are getting it done. It is easy. They get it. And what's cool about this stage 2 is there's a whole lot of like if you need quality assurance going on, or you need people to really focus on those details, and they're able to do it here, right? Lots of loyalty, lots of productivity, all that is going on. And so if you look on page 44, just glance through this. Lots of competence, lots of enthusiasm, lots of productivity. You can look at what people are saying. They're like, they look at the second bullet. Look at that. It says, I still don't like it, but I get it. Right? Remember, this is not about liking it necessarily. This is working better than I thought it would. This change really does have benefits. I'm glad we did this. That's all happening once they start seeing the fruits of their labor. Now, here's the deal. Remember I said there's a time that you could tweak something. Back in stage 3, not the time. When you get over into stage 4, not quite the time, but once they're kind of doing the thing, and we now all have a clear understanding of what that looks like, stage 5, if you need to make a tweak, then that's okay. Right, you come in, you need to move things. That does not throw everybody back into stage 1. You're just doing process improvement, and you can continue the momentum forward because they're seeing it as part of that bigger picture, right? Too hard to see back in stage 3. So if you do need to tweak, stage 5 is when you're going to do that. So the tone has changed again, super positive, but super confident. They're getting things done. Marc-Andre, would you mind reading what we're doing here with managing tasks and managing people?
Yeah, so managing task and results, load direction, distribute authority, maintain accountability for results. And then for managing people, high reinforcement, celebrate victories, accentuate benefits to change, and give credit where it's due.
See, do you see, you're pretty much hands off right now. They have it going on. They're doing the thing, they're professionals at it, they're getting things done. And so you want to, of course, give credit where credit's due, keep spreading that out. You do want them to stay accountable, but they can be a whole lot more now because they have a total clear understanding. And one of the ways you can keep them rolling forward is what I mentioned about whatever you focus on expands. If you highlight somebody doing really well in a particular thing, they're going to want to do it again. So that's part of that celebrating victories. And I want to ask you about that here in just a second. So again, all of this, as we're rolling along, either managing ourselves or managing others in a team or one-on-one, is really keeping them focused on everything they're doing well and continuing to sort of fan the flames. Now, one of the things you can also start to do now is they can see they can get it done. You can start pushing the goal level up a little bit. Give them a little challenge. I mean, they're ready for it. Give them a little bit more. Okay, so you're doing this level. What do you think? How long do you think it'll take you to get to that? That is aspirational for them. Would not have been back in stage 3. Now they can go, oh yeah, we could do that. We can reach that. So looking down on the ways that we're managing one-on-one or our team, you can see acknowledging results and productivity, assisting in short-term, long-term goals and strategies. Here's one other thing. They're super able and maybe even right to become a mentor when they get to this stage. This is the group of people that you could say, would you please go back to stage 2 and get Fred? or they're the ones that are totally they've got the big picture in mind, but they also have the capability. So if there's something that they can allay in fears, or they need to give someone in stage 3 strategies, they can do that, right? And especially this is great because you let a peer go over and help somebody else, that just changes the dynamic when somebody's struggling coming along. Does that make sense? So just kind of paying attention to those are in this stage. They might be not just willing and able, but eager to be of help there. That could be something else that we could make sure we can give them as even a perk or a benefit. Hey, maybe you can start your hand at leadership by helping in this way. So what we're trying to do is just recognize, looking on page 46, one of the other things, because people are so kind of open and seeing how things are done, if you're looking for lessons learned, processes like how we do we do okay, this is the time you can bring all that stuff up. They've got it. They have a vision on that, and they understand and can put in place some upgrades, and it's okay. Won't send you back. Keeps you moving forward. So on the to-do list, the more you can continue to recognize and celebrate victories, all good. Spotlighting milestones, all good, and celebrating. So I'm just curious. I know you mentioned having Bob, having a way for recognition. What other methods do you, I'd love to hear a couple of ideas, do you celebrate victories? So Joe, you were nodding there. Tell me, what method do you use?
I know as a team, we've had like little happy hour get-togethers when big milestones happen.
Nice. Anybody else? What else do you do?
One thing that Marc-Andre and Heidi do is they have like weekly email. Well, Marc-Andre's weekly email, Heidi has a vlog. And it's like our higher up leaders, people who are individual contributors, get like really excited to hear their name come out of like higher leaders' mouths. It's like, oh, this person did a good job. So I think those regular videos and emails help.
Nice. Excellent. Oh, I'm seeing team lunches. Very good. Excellent. Yeah. I mean, all of these are great. Again, you shine a spotlight. And now here's one key. If you want to see the behavior repeated, make sure they're very clear on what it is they did well, so they can know it. And the reason I say that is because sometimes as leaders, we get in a hurry and we go, hey, good job today. And that's okay. I mean, we'll take it. But if they don't know what we meant, like what they did, they're not likely to be able to repeat it, right? But if we stop and say, thank you so much. The fact you turned that report in early, that allowed me to get my report done, and then I could pass that on again and do it early. Thank you so much for getting that in early. Do they know what they're being praised for? And so I'm specific enough is all I'm saying. Any other ideas of what you do to celebrate? Okay, so just keep that tucked away and recognize that this is a time where you could pull that out and just give as much credit away as possible, because the next change is coming.
I do want to say one quick thing. You had asked, I was on mute when I was talking, sorry.
Yeah.
One other thing that I think has been really effective for my team in particular is the skip level meetings that are happening, they're going past me. So it's giving my team an audience with a little bit more senior leadership, and they're able to talk through some of the successes they've had. And I think that's been great. My leaders then come back to me and provided that kind of feedback as well. So I think that's a great opportunity also.
All right, very good. It sounds like something to continue, yeah? Any others? All right, so we get stage 5. All right, so if we focus on those benefits, now we can take this change home and end in stage 6 integration. And just to give you a feel for what stage 6 integration means, it is, now everybody think of one of these. It is a change that you have so fully finished that you almost can't remember what it was like before. Everybody got a change like that? That when you think back, you're like, oh yeah, wow, that happened 2 years ago, or something occurred, and now it's just the way we do business. Everybody have something like that you can think of? So that describes stage 6. When we get to this point, it just is the way we do things. And what's interesting about it is there's a lot of feelings of satisfaction, a lot of thoughts are focused, and here's what happens. Not only with this change, but also if you get to stage 6 in your life or your career, people become very compassionate and generous. They tend to, that's like when in your career, people tend to maybe become mentors when they get to this stage, or they want to give back and become philanthropic and things like that, because they know they've gotten to this level. At this point, it's so important, however, to recognize that this process of change is never done. I mean, one day it'll be done, but you know what I mean? It's never, we're not finished with change in general. We're finished with this change, because if I get to this stage and then sit down and go, I'm all done, what could happen? What do you think, Althea? I can see with the thought there. What do you think could happen? What's at risk here?
Going backwards.
Yeah, it could be going backwards, but it could also mean I start to become what?
Complacent.
Complacent. Oh my gosh. I mean, think about, we have known whole industries that have think they've arrived. They're like, we're done changing and innovating. We've done it. We'll sit down. And this younger, leaner, meaner, more innovative group comes right up and rolls past them. Here's what's important. When we get to stage 6, it's great to celebrate. It's great to be compassionate and generous. And all of those things are an important part of feeling like, ooh, this is how we do business. But we need to stay flexible. And the way we stay flexible is that we make that a part of our culture. That we not only learn flexibility as a skill, but we respect it and expect it as a value at our organization. Does that make sense? So that when people join us, they know change is part of the equation. We want to stay light on our feet because we need to stay flexible in the industry. Do you see how important that is? And sometimes, that what we're talking about is, and you can pay attention to this, turn to page 48. Sometimes you're going to hear a little bit of rigid versus flexible talk. Like, did anybody hear kind of as we, the last or early on in the pandemic or whatever, we heard people say, I can't wait till I can get back to normal. Anybody hear that? And so that's kind of a sign that people were just like waiting for the other shoe, or they were holding on. They weren't really making the changes that needed. They were just wanting to get back to the other way. When you make changes in your organization, that's the way forward, right? And so that's part of where we need to continue to help our workforce see change as part of the equation. It's part of the improvement. And so there's a looking to notice more, know more here. Look on page 48, you can see some of the things that indicate when we're slow to integrate, or we really are integrated, meaning it's fully on board. So that kind of movement, we want people to stay in that. How can we make it work? How can we make another change? What do we need to do to improve this? That's all part of it. Looking over onto page 49, just real quick, you can see.
Hey, Jackie, can I ask a follow-up question on that? Looking at some of these slow to integrate descriptions. How do you differentiate somebody who is, meets all of these characteristics versus somebody on your team who might be stuck in some of those earlier stages where you really need to go back to the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And part of this is if you've seen people already sort of making it over there, but you can tell, and this is why I said during the pandemic, I saw people like doing all the things, but you could almost feel that they were waiting. They're just like, okay, I'm gonna kind of go through the motions and not really make that. And so some of the things, that rigid talk, etc. Yeah, it can look like early stages 1 and 2. What we want to do is begin to reinforce, motivate, keep praising them for all the things they're doing that got them over to stage 5 or perhaps even 6 at this point. And isn't it great? See, we're moving through that. So we have to watch our own talk about going back in any way, because that sort of gives them permission to do the same thing. And so it isn't easy to distinguish. All you can pay attention to is their behavior then after their talk. Right. And if you can keep talking them toward, oh, guess what? We're getting ready for the next change. Guess what? Something else is coming. And just FYI, there are certain styles and personalities of communication that need a longer on-ramp to change than others. Right. Have you noticed that? Certain people need a longer on-ramp. When you get all the way over to stage 6, if you know another change is coming, or if you have any indication about, okay, so 2 months from now we're going to start towards something else, go ahead and start telling people some of that. Give them a little lead time to go through the process and the thinking through it, so that those who need more time can get it. Does that answer that for you, Michelle?
Yeah, thank you.
So let's just roll through, look at this. Once they get to stage 6, they got it going on. We don't need to do a lot except continue to get them ready for something else. And one way we can also do is to give them education, something they can learn more, they can try something new, and even some personal responsibility for maybe they're ready to take on something that they weren't before, but because they've been through all of this, they could take that on. So just looking at on managing others and managing yourself, this is a great time to go back and look, how did we do? Did this go well? Did this not go well? What worked? What didn't work? We're looking back through a really clear lens, so we can go back and analyze how we might have made that better. What could we do? What did we do well? What did we not? One other thing that can happen here too is you can start like I mentioned, you can start future pacing people, but you can also start distributing some authority. People have been through it, and maybe they can help you with the next one. So you're starting to pull them into those ideas, and they can have some authority, accountability, or responsibility. Even some extra training might be a good way to show them, look what progress we've made. This can be kind of a reward for them. So again, very much like stages 4 and 5, don't worry about over managing people here. They've got it going on, but you will send the feeling of whether or not we're going to gear up for something next, or whether we're sitting back. And so just watch. If it starts to sound like you're becoming complacent, or your team is, and try to give them some, even if it's little changes that can keep them flexible, that can be good. Okay, so wow, we've come through it. And so as you just kind of look at this whole thing, what have we picked up? How are we going to use this moving forward, just based on what we've gone through today? Any thoughts or ideas?
You're asking what we will take with us as we
I would love
carry
to.
forth.
Yeah, actually, what I'd love to know is when you think about the changes you're going through right now, I mean, let's just put this to use in your right now. What have you picked up that you feel like, okay, that's an idea we can take some action on? Or even as you start to think of other changes coming down the road, what have you learned that you could put into use? So I'd love to hear maybe a comment from everybody, if you can. We've got just a few minutes before we end. So who would like to kind of kick that off? What'd you pick up?
Well, I'll go first because all the answers are still available.
Oh,
I will say that I definitely picked up have a plan before you go forth in your communication, and continual communication even when you don't have new information, I think is key. And I think of our changes that we've gone through recently, I'm in a position where people are looking for answers from me. I may not have all of the answers, but having those continual touch points will really be key for them to move through the change.
Nice. Very good. Someone else?
Yeah. Oh, you can have Dr. Brad.
I was just going to say, I picked up how important stage 3 is and really kind of helping people over that danger zone get into stage 4 so that we can kind of keep things moving along.
Nice. Okay, William?
Something you said, Jackie, resonated with me, where the way the team is structured, there's 3 different teams that all kind of matrix together. And you mentioned communication is not just an email, that's not information. I feel like we often, one team just emails out and expects all 3 teams to be on board. I think that's something I want to take away of.
Okay.
Information sharing, all three through the cycle together.
Yeah, very, very good. And listen, your organization is not alone on that. I mean, people assume everybody just gets it because it came in an email, but I don't know if you're like me and I get 100 and something emails. If it's important, we need to hear it more than once. Yeah, good. All right, somebody else?
I think the fact that, everyone's on their individual journey and making sure that you're giving everyone individual experience and working with them separately as needed to move them forward, as they may all be in different stages, is something that resonated.
Very good.
Yeah, I would resonate on the end of that it's perfectly okay for me to be yellow when other people are already green and some people are still red. You're ever going to be in your own space. It's going to be kind of an organic process that you have to work through. There's no bad place to be. It's just understanding you're there and how to move on.
That's right. There is real power in recognizing where you are and then knowing you can do something about it. And so hopefully that's part of what you picked up. What can I do about it? Okay, keep going. Anybody else?
For me, it's understanding how much I'm going to have to flex my style. So for some people in some stages, I need to micromanage. For other people, I shouldn't be micromanaging. And I tend to think of this as how I lead, and knowing that I have to flex a lot more depending on where my people are in different stages.
Wendy, I know that takes effort. I mean, it really does. You have to think through it, but will it be worth it if it gets them to move through more quickly?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that's the part you sometimes have to remind yourself when you're in the middle of it and going, oh my gosh. Just remember that it works and it's worth that extra effort. Okay, somebody else?
Yeah, just to build on that one, I think, this provides a kind of a better insight on where folks are at in the various stages, and then tools to help manage that change with those individual people. So kind of just doubling up on what Wendy said.
Specifically in stages 1 and 2, that was my big takeaway is, if we as leaders have a jump start on this, we might go in ready to share all the information we have to get everybody on board, but recognizing that we need to pause, read the room, and make space for those who might still be in the stage 1 of loss, and recognizing those emotions. So I think just breaking down those key behaviors to look for and whether or not they need safety or information in that first stage when you're sharing change, I think is pretty key.
Nice. Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else?
I can go next. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I think recognizing where people are at, and I think sometimes I maybe unintentionally have this audacious goal of taking someone from stage 1 to stage 5 or 6, or 2 to 5 or 6, recognizing where they at, what they need, just to take one step forward.
Nice. Well, and then, and can I just offer one other thing, to not take it personally if they're not coming along as fast as you would like. it has nothing to do with, I mean, everybody's on their own journey with it. And again, sometimes we know, but sometimes we don't know what everybody's going through in other realms of their life that's causing more angst around change in general. So that kind of understanding and sort of patience with it can make a big difference. Now, let me show one other thing. Here's the best part. When you are super patient with people in the process, you only need to do that a couple of times. If the next change that comes along, you need them to move more quickly, you know, that you can come to them because you've already invested in their, you know, personal needs around a couple of changes. And then you come back and say, look, here's the deal. We are under the gun. We have got to do this thing fast. You have built in a little rapport and permission in some ways with somebody because you've invested in them already, that you could ask that of them after you've already poured into them a few times. Does that make sense, you guys? The more you pour into them, the more later when you ask for a withdrawal, like, we got to hustle this up. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to approach this differently because that's what it needs. You've built up some credibility. So thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Jackie, I had actually a question.
Yeah.
I often are thinking of a like portfolio of change, or like how much capacity for change of multiple changes can someone go through at once. And so I guess I have a question of, is it better to put a couple changes in at once hitting a group, or do you want to try and go like one at a time through a curve through people? I don't know if there's a best practice.
Yeah, I wish there was. You know, I mean, I feel like it just depends. It depends on the size of the change. It depends on the type of the change. And since everybody's a little, everybody's unique in how they approach change, I guess I would probably avoid trying to do too many simultaneously, because even really good changers start to struggle then.
Yeah,
too many. So if you can pace it, and sometimes you can't, if you can pace it so that they can at least get themselves a little farther ahead on change one before you introduce change two, that does set them up for a little bit easier time.
Great.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else?
I think for me, just really appreciate all the comments so far. This is really insightful and awesome commentary. One of the things this is going to help me do is reflect better on where I'm at in the cycle as I'm leading the team, because I've had this happen, and I think it's probably a pretty common thing. You get to a place where you say, darn it, if I was here 2 weeks ago, I would have done something different 2 weeks ago, and I would have shown up differently. So being able to separate how you're feeling and how that might be biasing your leadership is going to be an important takeaway for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Heidi. Anyone else? Comments on what you're taking away?
I also really love the influencers or ambassadors for like Fred. I think I can leverage that a lot more in our teams, finding those people.
Yeah. And don't underestimate the power of that ongoing, because those ambassadors want to keep doing those things. And so the next change comes along, they want to show up well, so they might be able to do that again. And so, yeah, that can have residual ongoing benefits with additional changes. Well, if there aren't any other comments, I just want to say I thank you so much, guys. This has been great for me to get to know you. I hope this has been beneficial to you. And please know that I'm an ongoing resource through Heidi or Althea. If there's anything I can do as you move along and implement them, please reach out. And this, I can't underestimate how this can be a great resource for you. So if you don't keep your guide around, easy to access, please keep this there. This is also, I think, something else you have. And one other resource that if you ever get down the road and you want to know what your people are feeling, that e-locator you took is actually it's something anybody could take, right? And so if you decide you want to see what your teams are really where they are, that a lot of organizations use that to sort of survey the group. to find out where everybody is on a particular change. So use these resources, reach out if I can do anything for you. And otherwise, I thank you so much for being so participative and giving it your all. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Jackie. This has been just tremendous. I got so much out of this. I'm really excited for our team for the next change we have, and also to leverage this and go back to some of the changes and debrief on how we would have implemented this. So thank you to my team for your engagement on this. Lots of gratitude to Althea, who coordinated this and has been partnering with me on this important topic. So thank you, Althea. And Jackie, huge thanks. This has been really terrific. I am very appreciative.
You bet.
Fantastic.
Enjoy, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great rest of your week. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.